On August 17, 2035, we discovered that it had already been 5 years since a massive catastrophe happened. Since that day, various monsters started appearing everywhere, ready to devour anything that moves, turning all humans into mere prey. On the rooftop of a building, we see a young man sitting, hiding, and we learn that years later, 40% of humanity is still alive thanks to awakened workers. The young man, still sitting, listens to the radio on his cell phone to pass the time. Discrediting the awakened, the announcer says he believes humanity was still alive thanks to walls made of reinforced alloys. Hearing a noise, the boy stands up to see what's happening, realizing that the noises are monsters wandering the streets below. Just by looking, he concludes that 6 creatures are Class C above average level and only 1 is Class A, exactly as Jichiel said would happen. Grabbing his binoculars, the young man tries to see more around, spotting an empty parking lot nearby. Reflecting, he says that things are about to get real. Suddenly, yellow lightning appears in the place he was observing. Smiling, the boy states that this is the so-called sudden gate. In the middle of the yellow rays of light, a passage starts to open. Still observing, the young man comments that someone told him that people usually come out of these portals. Proving that the information was true, a man appears, jumping amid the light, landing successfully on the ground right after, while keeping his arms covering his face in an X shape. Without opening his eyes, the traveler says that he finally came back, raising his arms in celebration from so much joy. But his arrival ends up attracting the attention of the nearby creatures, which immediately start running toward him. Making a grimace, the man realizes that he just arrived and is already screwed. Looking at a creature that looks like a satanic octopus, he wonders why that type of monster is there. Still on top of the building, the boy with the binoculars keeps watching while smiling, showing he was expecting that. Down below, a green creature prepares to unleash a devastating blow on the newcomer, while the spying boy states that it has finally begun. After a while of fighting, the traveler finds himself injured and a protagonist thinks that to face a high-level Class C monster, it takes at least 10 high-level hunters. The man then launches his attack called the Cradle of Swords, making thousands of swords of light fly toward the monster. Following the traveler's command, who, using his hand, coordinates the strike and hits several parts of the creature's body. Up there, the protagonist reveals that the man has already eliminated 6 monsters in just 1 hour. The most impressive thing is that he did it all alone, leaving only the class of monster. Impossible to defeat even if all the class as hunters in the world gathered. Smiling, the nosy boy says that hearing is very different from witnessing a copy master in action. The creature without hesitation launches an extremely dangerous attack, making the time traveler widen his eyes. The protagonist then states that he just needs to wait a little longer for all that power to be his. Dodging the strike while flying in the air, the copy master prepares to counterattack amid powerful rays of light, revealing that he is using his ghost sprint ability, activating right after his demonic blade capable of cutting countless times in a zigzag. With this beautiful attack, the man successfully takes down the monster. Excited, the boy with the binoculars says that was a battle beyond comprehension. But now that the hunter has also fallen, he must start moving. Getting closer, the boy thinks that up to that moment, everything is happening exactly as Kai Chul-hyung said it would. Touching the hunter, he calls him and asks if he is okay, remembering that the person who gave him the information said they saved someone and gained their power. But the situation looks bad and the man on the ground starts coughing up his strawberry juice. The boy then wonders how he can help him. Opening his eyes, the wounded man asks what year it is. Answering, the boy says it is August 2035. Upon hearing that, the man starts getting up, saying that he spent 30 years in the place he came from while only 5 years pass here. Worried, the protagonist asks him not to move too much and to lie back down. But the man says it's already too late. Without showing any reaction, the boy thinks he already knows that the man won't survive the day. Regretting, the traveler states that he shouldn't have consumed most of his power to open the portal. Silent, the boy shows only a sad expression. Knowing his fate, the hunter then reveals that he has something to ask, stating that he wants the boy to find his family and take care of them if they are still alive. Sadly, he hands a photo to his helper. Sweet and cold, the young man says that, in fact, he is in no condition to take care of anyone. But the man says he's not asking him to do it for free and will therefore give him his power. He only needs his name to start the transfer. We discover that in this world hit by apocalyptic disasters, the protagonist's life has always had 2 common themes. We are taken to one of these themes where the boy finds himself wounded on the ground. In front of him, an armored man says that he finally met Choi Jun-hyuk. All of this happened in June 2058. Mocking, the blonde man tells him not to squirm again like an eel. We see that the boy is unfortunately gravely wounded in the abdomen. Looking forward, he says that it seems this time he won't be able to escape and asks who told the man that he was there. Smiling evilly, the villain says it was Jin-soo, with whom he made a deal of $1 million and the promise not to hunt him down. The information enrages Hyuk, who curses the traitor. Grabbing a sword, the man says that now that he has the answers he needed, he can finish what he started. Suddenly, the protagonist realizes that those words are familiar, and grabbing a shining stone, he states that it was like this that, through the object, he found a way to reverse his life. Stealing the artifact, the villain shows no reaction. The boy then says that this is the regression stone, Widening his eyes, the man realizes what's about to happen and orders his henchmen to stop the boy. But it is too late and a strong light begins to emerge. Smiling, our boy says goodbye and states that he will find Jonathan Curtis in the past. While traveling, all he wishes is that he goes back at least to the time when his siblings were alive. Everything works out and we find ourselves in the present moment where he went back 23 years with the world still on the brink of collapse. And he is introducing himself to the traveler who said he would pass on his power. The two shake hands to begin the transfer. Thinking, Huck says that this time things will be different. A strong wind starts and the system asks the man who previously had the power if he wants his body to disappear afterward. Considering himself a dead man, he clicks to execute this action, while the protagonist perceives all of his abilities. When the percentage reaches 20%, the man lying on the ground says the boy cannot let his guard down, since even though the process is underway, if something happens, everything can be cancelled. Suddenly, a huge creature appears behind our boy, leaving him in a very complicated situation. Laughing, the hunter says that life really is a mess. Upon seeing that the monster is the same one he thought he had defeated, incapacitated, Park Kang-ho says that in novels, people usually go home and live happily ever after. Warning right after that he will give up his powers soon, so the boy must run away immediately. Because unfortunately, there is nothing else that can be done. Since if life is a mess, one must live with the mess. His last advice is that Hyuk should adapt and survive as much as he can. Surprising him, the boy grabs an iron bar, stating that he's not crazy, just tired of always running away. Determined, he faces the classic creature, but it does not attack him. Turning its back, it walks away, leaving him confused. Dropping the iron bar relieved, he says that he thought he was going to die from the tension. The hunter then says that he is very lucky, but the boy replies that it was all thanks to him, because if the monster hadn't been severely wounded. But before he could finish speaking, Hyuk realizes that the man's body is disappearing and gets scared. Unbothered, the man says that he must fulfill his promise and find his family if he doesn't want to be haunted forever. The transfer process ends and a message warns that the user's body is inadequate to receive the system, and it will have to be rebuilt through awakening. Catching the boy off guard, the last warning is that the reconstruction process may cause pain. Immediately, Hyuk feels a crack in his neck and realizes that even though he's trying to act tough, it hurts a lot. His whole body twists and he says it's as if all of his bones are breaking and his skin is shredding. Dropping the act, the boy looks up and starts screaming intensely. The next day in the morning, a man inside a vehicle approaches whistling. Suddenly something in front of him catches his attention. It's the protagonist who is at the place tying boxes onto a pickup truck. Seeing Kai Chil-hyun approaching, the boy asks what he is doing there. Without answering, the man asks the same question, since it was the boy who asked for time off and switched shifts with him. Lying, Huck says that he was just about to go home when a monster appeared and trapped him there. Astonished, his colleague asks if he wanted to die by daring to sleep in that place. Dodging the question, the protagonist asks him to just ignore that fact. Then he says that it's way too early for Hyun to be there without the rest of the team. Also lying, the man says that he has recently been waking up earlier than everyone else. That's why he arrived first. Thinking to himself, our boy says he knows the man is hiding something at that place. We discover that the man has already tried but failed to use the copy master power correctly, which led him to get beaten up so badly by other awakened members that whoever found him thought he was dead. Thus, the reason for his downfall was very simple, as the fool decided to reveal during his registration that he had the ability to copy, which angered many people who couldn't accept having their precious abilities copied so easily. After saying goodbye and starting the car, Chuck looks at the passenger seat, where there are 3 Class B crystals and 4 Class C crystals, which he stole from Hyun, even though he feels bad because those items saved his life. Now he just needs to figure out how to use them since he can't sell them. We also discover that Hyun, after awakening with Kang-ho's power, failed to retrieve any of the unknown crystals. So when he returned the next day to recover them, they were all gone. Not protecting the crystals became the greatest regret of the man's life. That's why Heck planned to grab the items as early as possible. Reflecting, the boy thinks that if it's just monster cores, he might be able to sell them discreetly. But if it's the core of a high-level monster, he'll end up attracting the attention of the association and the government, who will start an investigation. For the protagonist, in the worst-case scenario, he won't get the full value and will end up selling the crystals for peanuts. Staring at the phone screen, he concludes that there's only one way out: to register quickly as an awakened. Someone answers his call and asks the reason for the call. Smiling, the boy tells Shulmin that he has money and would like to meet for some beers, where he'll pay for the drinks if the guy agrees to do him a favor. In the safe zone of Seoul, Huck talks to someone inside a building. The man in front of him says he'll pay $600 for all the items he brought, but the boy asks him to raise the price a little. A bit embarrassed, the buyer says that items like those used to cost $800, but the man has declined. Dissatisfied, our boy thinks about what to do next. While the man explains that the population is shrinking, prices are rising, and no one wants to spend. Suddenly, 2 kids show up crying. Hugging the protagonist, they say they thought he had abandoned them. Huck kneels down to get closer and speak more directly. With Choi Eun-jung, his little sister, and Choi Eun-chul, his little brother. Pointing his finger, he asks what the two are doing there instead of being at school. Interrupting, the man says that the boys shouldn't scold the little ones who only came because they were very worried. Then says the boy should start thinking better about what will happen to his siblings if something bad happens to him. Hyuk then asks the children to stop crying and to come home with him where he will prepare lunch. His younger siblings start smiling when they hear they will have grilled meat. Koi Eunjun then calls his attention and says that the grandma from the floor above told him to stop by when he returns because the rent is very overdue. Everyone gets in the car and heads to the apartment. As promised, Hyuk took care of lunch. At the table are his siblings, the grandma, and her grandson. The elderly lady then asks why he brought so much food. Smiling, the protagonist says he stopped by the butcher to buy meat and thought of her. Worried, the woman says he should have saved it for his little siblings. Without replying, Hyuk hands her an envelope containing the overdue rent money. Grabbing the envelope, the woman says she knows about his situation and has decided to charge only half the amount. Surprised, our boy says it's not necessary. But the old lady's grandson says that in difficult times, they should help each other, so he better just accept the offer. His grandmother hits him on the head with a spoon and says that the apartment is hers, so he shouldn't interfere. Joking while bringing his hand to his head, the boy says that when she dies, the house will be his. Threatening to hit him again, the old lady says that it's because of Changsu that her stomach has been upset, since he doesn't study and just wanders around doing nonsense while lying that he's studying. The boy then states that he's preparing so that when he awakens, he can finally learn from real hunters, because the area now belongs to the awakened and the hunters and things like college are no longer necessary. Annoyed, the lady asks Hyuk to talk to her grandson because the young man usually listens to him. Suddenly, the protagonist's phone rings. Going to the balcony, he answers, and on the other end, Cheol-min says that he spoke with his guild leader and the man asked him to show up, but he must go knowing that he won't get paid. He may be added as a regular member of the group in a secondary role if he does well. The protagonist agrees and his friend asks why he suddenly wants to become a porter. Unable to tell the truth, the boy says that his current job is getting difficult, making him look for other options. Cheol-min then says that in that case, he should show up at gate 7 on the west wall the next day at 7:30 in the morning. Ending the call, our boy says that everything is going according to plan. The next day, he arrives at the gate, determined to copy the tanker skill and go straight to the association to register. His friend calls his name and approaches, saying that he arrived early. Smiling, the boy waves but can only think about the plan he set up. Cheol-min then calls his leader, Hyun, who is a tanker, and says that this is the friend he mentioned earlier. The man introduces himself and says that he's the oldest, so the boy should feel free to ask anything. Extending his hand for a handshake, the boy says he's looking forward to working with him. Hyun shakes his hand and says the feeling is mutual, without even knowing his skills were copied. A message pops up for Hyuk, informing him that he can choose 3 of the skills he copied. Without hesitation, he chooses the skills Iron Skin, Shield Attack, and Overload. The system notifies Hyuk that the skill copying is complete and that they can be viewed in the skill menu. Our boy thinks that it only took enough time during a mere handshake, and now he has the ability of a tanker. Standing in front of him, the armored man watches, not understanding the reason for the smile on his face. Cheol-min then asks what he's doing, or rather why he's smiling like that in such a creepy way while still holding the handshake. Easing the awkward atmosphere, the man says that he's got a strong grip and laughs. Embarrassed, the protagonist lets go of the team leader's hand and apologizes, but the man says it's fine, then asks him to get in the vehicle that is just ahead. A little closer to the car, we can see 2 guys chatting, and a girl and another guy who seem to be analyzing their bows. The driver is already ready, and near him is a young woman distracted while looking at her phone. Giving instructions, the armored man asks Jung Hyuk to greet the group members before boarding. But the boy can only think about how the skills of these people will be useless when he copies the abilities of higher-level awakened, concluding that even so, he'll have to copy the group members' skills, even if he deletes them later. Starting the trip, the truck leaves with the team. Sitting, our boy reveals that he has already copied 13 skills by that moment, where 3 are healer skills. We return to the girl who was distracted earlier, and she is still on her phone. Looking at her, the boy reveals that he also grabbed a mapping skill and 2 hunter skills, and 7 negotiator skills, stating that the most amazing thing about all this is that now he can use them all together. We see a place full of buildings, where lizard-like creatures with purple tongues and red eyes run, apparently to attack someone. It's Hyun, who, using his shield, asks the creature where it thinks it's going. Meanwhile, the protagonist keeps thinking about how having skills in multiple roles can make him powerful depending on the combinations he makes. Lee Dong-yeop joins the battle following the orders of his leader and swiftly shoots using his bow and arrows, hitting one of the monsters squarely in 3 different spots. The leader then orders Yejin to finish the battle quickly. Hidden on top of one of the buildings, the girl says that she understands. Then she fires an arrow at high speed that hits the monster right in the eye. The creature falls and Hyun praises everyone for the good work, informing them that only 2 enemies remain. In the back, just observing, Jung Hyuk wonders if he should try to register just for fun, concluding that it's better to do it when the hunt is over since there's no need to complicate things. Some time passes from that moment, Approaching, the team leader says it was a good hunt and praises the protagonist's endurance, who carried a large amount of byproducts throughout that day. Suddenly, something catches the man's attention. We see another guy approaching with a bag on his back, saying that he can't take it anymore. Min then says that his friend was quite famous at school because of his fists. The man asks if he's talking about the school for the catastrophe. Confirming, the boy says that the protagonist, even without training, left all the athletes in the dust. We see that Jun-hyuk is listening to everything and gets embarrassed when the team leader asks if he was a delinquent. But his friend says that he only hit those who deserved it and had the dream of becoming a detective. Ending the conversation, the man hands our boy an envelope containing the payment for the day. However, the boy says he doesn't need it, but Hyung still tells him to take it and just say thank you, since if it weren't for his help, things would have turned out differently, which leads him to ask if he wouldn't like to continue being a porter. Smiling, our boy says he'll think about it. The man walks away and says they will meet again soon. Min then asks if the protagonist is going to the barbecue later, but he says he already has plans for that night. Curious, the young man asks what plans he's talking about and whether it's a date with a girl. Some more time passes, and we see the Seoul Awakened Association building. At the exclusive counter for tankers, a female employee looks nervous about something she just heard. In front of her is Hyuk, and the girl asks if he can repeat what he just said. Repeating, the boy says that he came to register as an awakened, and the girl asks if he's sure he's an awakened tanker. Confirming, he says that he awakened as one that very morning. Not believing it, the girl looks at him with an expression that says she isn't sure whether that's even possible. Nervous, the boy asks if there's something wrong with what he said. The girl then says that it's just that he's the first person to awaken as a tanker in months, and congratulates him for that, saying that to continue the process, she just needs his ID. Our boy quickly hands over the document. Pointing to a bench where there are other people, the girl says that he can sit there and wait. With not much to do, the boy sits down, as a feeling of sadness starts to overflow on his face. Putting his hand on his head, he thinks about how he thought he was dreaming when he opened his eyes for the first time after returning. Then remembers when he was imprisoned and his siblings visited him, but ended up dying in a car accident, which made him cry for days without stopping, and was also the reason why he decided to become a bad person. But when he went back to the past and found the two alive, his heart was filled only with joy, and that's why he thought he was dreaming at first. So when he realized it was all real, he promised never to lose the people he cares about again, and for that, he will protect everyone with everything he has. Activating his system, he decides to take a look at the reports, then noticing that the resistance varies from 6,000 to 15,000, while strength is randomly assigned between 2,000 and 5,000, which means that his start was actually pretty good for a first awakening. Suddenly, a notification appears saying that the core generation is in progress, which leaves him confused. Even without knowing what it is, Hyuk decides to wait for the process to finish to find out. Suddenly, someone approaches and calls his name. He turns his head to see who it is, and comes face to face with the girl who attended him, standing next to a man in a lab coat. Smiling, the girl hands back his ID, and says that the identity verification has been successfully completed. Now he just needs to follow the doctor to take the test. Introducing himself, the man extends his hand and says his name is Lim Jae-hoon. Our boy also introduces himself and says it's a pleasure to meet him. The two then shake hands. And the man says that he prepared everything in advance so the test can start immediately. In the elevator, the boy reveals in his thoughts that he tried to copy the man's ability, but he is not an awakened, which to him is strange since he thought that those who worked for the association had abilities. Inside a room, the man says that the test has 3 stages, the first being the measurement of resistance and strength levels through a device. Hyuk is lying down with several wires connected to his body, and the doctor warns that the measurement will begin, and that it will take 10 minutes to complete, so he should relax. About the second stage, the man says it involves using his unique ability, in this case, shield attack. After some time, there's the boy with his shield in hand preparing to fight a dummy monster, while the doctor and another person watch everything through a glass window. Jae-hoon then informs that the aggression rate measurement will begin, and the boy just needs to attack the dummy in front of him. The protagonist obeys without thinking twice, and the man says he can feel free to hit wherever he wants. Our boy then chooses to strike the dummy's head with the shield, leaving the doctors completely stunned. Move on to the third stage and see the doctor handing Hyuk a cup with what seems to be hot coffee. The man then says that due to some problems with the selection of evaluators, the third part will only happen in 2 days. Grabbing the coffee, the boy asks if everything is fine with today's tests, and the doctor says yes. He just needs to go to the reception to pick up the basic equipment. Exciting, our boy says through his teeth that he can't believe the day has finally come when he will receive the association's standard equipment. Sharing a concern, Jae-hoon says that he's uneasy about the decreasing number of tankers and healers. Sipping the drink, the protagonist just listens carefully. The man then says that most people forced to awaken are choosing the negotiator or support categories. Not to mention that awakening stones are hard to find, especially those for tankers and healers. Reflecting a bit, the protagonist concludes that the biggest problem of all is that even with a stone, there is no guarantee the person will awaken, and he, as a criminal, couldn't register as an awakened. Pausing for a moment, the doctor apologizes and says he just got excited seeing a tanker after so long. Standing up, Cook says it's no problem. Wrapping things up, Jae-hoon says the boy must show up at the scheduled time to complete the third test, which will be sent via text message the next day. The man extends his hand to the protagonist, and he stares at it, then smiles as he returns the handshake, saying he's looking forward to working with the man. Outside, we can see the sky getting darker as night approaches. With a suitcase, Hyuk walks down the street while calling someone. Answering, Cheol-min asks what happened. The boy then says it's nothing serious. He just wanted to let him know that he awakened as a tanker earlier. Shocked, the guy on the other end asks if he's being serious or just joking. Looking inside a building window, our boy says he wouldn't joke about something like that, then decides to walk into what seems to be a shop, thinking that he must be in the right place while his friend finally believes what he heard. Laughing, the guy impressed says it's unbelievable, because they were together just a few hours ago, and now suddenly his friend became a tanker. Without getting an answer, the young man asks if Hyuk is still on the line. Our boy is distracted looking at a front leg model of a mantis that costs an incredible $3 million. Remembering the phone, he says the call got a bit unstable, then talks about his visit to the association earlier. Revealing the reason for the call, he says that since only the third part is left, he'd like to know if he can go on another hunt to observe. His friend then asks why if he already saw how things work. Answering, the boy says that he was too focused on carrying stuff to pay attention to all the steps Hyun was taking. Suddenly, finding something, our boy gets happy. Still on the line, Cheol-min says he'll check with the team leader and get back to him with an answer. The boy thanks him and, grabbing the item, tells the seller that he would like to take the bracelet along with an Exeter solution. Thinking to himself, he says that if he's not mistaken, that is the artifact used by Jaden Russell, who ranked third among the villains. This was before the regression when he was in 8th place in the ranking, and ended up going out for drinks with the man who explained to him the method to acquire the bracelet and the main potions. Without saying anything, the seller just stares at him coldly. Still thinking about the 30% efficiency boost he'll gain in all abilities with the item, the boy also stays silent. Breaking the ice, he then asks why the man is staring at him like that. Apologizing for the intrusion, the seller asks if the boy registered as an awakened earlier. Our boy says yes, and out of nowhere, the man raises his fist as if he's going to punch him in the face. But catching him by surprise, he stops his arm right in front of his face, saying that he knew he was right. Smiling, the man says that he's also an awakened and his ability is teleportation. Relieved, the protagonist doesn't show much reaction while thinking about how his heart raced, thinking he was about to get punched. Extending his arm to return the fist bump, he thinks to himself that in this case, he should copy that ability too. Another man appears and introduces himself as Hwang Mansu, an awakened with the ability of spatial manipulation. Saying it's a pleasure to meet him, Huck thinks that this is yet another ability he would really like to have. The first seller then says that he overheard the boy's phone conversation and asks if he really is a tanker. Next to him, the other man says that having that ability makes him practically a noble among the awakened. Our boy then says that he didn't expect to find awakened like them there and asks if that's a side job. The two men deny it and say that working at the shop is actually their main job. Explaining, the seller with slightly longer hair says that with so many people awakening with support abilities, it became hard to find a job. The other says that to make a living, he decided to become the owner of a store that sells antiques and supplies for awakened. He then hands over the Exeter solution that the boy asked for and says that both items will cost 300,000 karo. Huck smiles while thinking that now he has all the materials he needs. The bracelet, the solution, the above-ranked crystals that are at his home, and his strawberry juice that will link him to all the objects. Already at home, he looks at the bracelet, which is now glowing in shades of purple, and concludes that he did it. Putting the accessory on his arm, the boy reveals that its name is Twilight. Suddenly, a message appears notifying that the 38th artifact among the 101 created by the original Master System has been activated, and that the Twilight bracelet has now been registered as a combined artifact in the system and can be seen alongside other artifacts already registered. We also discover that since the accessory was registered by a user of the original system, it has been fully unlocked. A bit confused, Hook wonders what the information about the 101 artifacts means. His phone rings, snapping him out of his thoughts. Looking at the device, he says it scared him. On the other end of the line is Cheol-min, who says that he told Hyun about him. But the man said it's impossible that he awakened as a tanker, and for that reason, he'll only believe it if he sees it with his own eyes. Our boy laughs and says he thought he had been rejected. His friend laughs too and says he can relax. Out of nowhere, the spatial manipulation ability that our boy copied activates and a portal opens. Even scared, he starts passing his arm through while Cheol-min asks him not to be late the next day. Grabbing his suitcase, the boy says that he'll be there at the scheduled time, and that he'll see him tomorrow. The next day, we see the entire team gathered in front of Gate 7 as agreed. Someone shouts greetings, leaving everyone there shocked. It's Hyuk, who was wearing the gear he got from the association and holding a shield. Hyolmin, still with his mouth open, comments about the outfit the boy is wearing, and Hyung interrupts, confirming that he really did become a tanker. Also shocked, the man asks how that happened in just one day. Embarrassed and blatantly lying, the protagonist says that he awakened while heading home. The leader then says that it's truly impressive since natural awakening rates have drastically dropped. Agreeing, the boy states that the next day he will take the final test of his ability and wanted to know if the man could help him. The man replies that he's not sure if he can actually teach him anything, but he does have a piece of advice to give as someone who started this job before him. Grabbing his shield, he asks if the young man knows why he always carries it. He then states that it's not because he awakened as a tanker, but because he chose to. Because when facing monsters, there always comes a time when the body gets exhausted, so the boy must always remember that what will help him recover is not skills or stats, but the determination he has. With the advice given, the group heads to the battlefield. We can see that right in the center of the place, there's a monster that looks like a mix between a bear and an armadillo sleeping, hidden. The leader asks Hyungnim if he has identified the type of prey and its location. The young man says yes, and that it is a Trudecker. Hyun then says that in that case, they can begin. He then orders Jang Daejin to check the monster's location again. Without even thinking, the young man starts mapping. Facing the map, the leader informs everyone in the monster type, stating that they are Trudeckers, monsters that have low attack power and slow movements, but defensibility as high as an E-rank monster. Worried, Hyolmin says he doesn't know if they have enough strength. One of his companions then says that it hasn't even started yet, but he already feels exhausted. Another young man, also concerned, says he's afraid the monster will come running toward him. Encouraging everyone, the leader reinforces the fact that the prey is slow and says that his team is one of the best veteran teams he knows. Approaching the young woman with long hair, jokes that in this case, it looks like the day will be easy for her as the healer. Hyun then asks Jikyul if all the traps are ready, and the young man says yes. Grabbing his shield, he asks Hyolmin and Dongyuk to follow him. Haisu and Hyuk must stay where they are. The protagonist says he understood the command. While watching part of the team moving away, he thinks that something there seems strange, because he is sure that the reason his friend's group was wiped out in the past was due to the appearance of another monster. But if the creature were a Drumeki, the team should have handled it, so he needs to find out why everyone died. Looking around, our boy concludes that something there definitely doesn't feel right. Back on the battlefield, the tanker leader asks Yejin if everything is ready, and she confirms yes. The man then orders the girl to open fire. The young woman shoots an arrow and hits the monster's shell directly. She then says that she will proceed to the next point as planned. Standing up, the monster shows that it is furious, and the leader, shouting, asks everyone to get ready for the fight. At his side, his partners affirm that they understood. Standing on just 2 legs, the creature prepares to attack with all its strength. Following the plan, the archer starts shooting, landing 3 precise arrows. The bear-armadillo hybrid roars, showing that it felt the hit, making the young man realize that he actually did a good job. Hyun then praises him and asks him to keep his distance, but the young man says he is going to charge in, leaving the man worried since that wasn't the plan. Face to face with the monster, a young man states that he doesn't want to just poke at its back but finish it and go home. His arrows hit the Trudecker's armpit, making it angrier than ever. The leader then asks the boy to stop being stupid and listen to him. But the boy mocks, saying that the creature is so slow it can't even hit him. He just didn't know he was talking too much, as the monster then hits him with its fists right after, throwing him hard against a wall. Worried, Cheolmin shouts, calling his friend, deciding that he's also going in now because he's angry. Jumping, the young man prepares to drive his sword into the monster, hitting it right on the shell, causing sparks to fly. Unfortunately for him, the blow wasn't fatal and the monster is now eyeing him. Screaming, he warns the team that the creature's shell is too hard and his sword didn't even scratch it. Turning around, the Trudecker decides to focus back on the boy who was thrown. About to be finished, the boy tries to shield himself from the creature's sharp claws, but Hyung steps in front to save him, attacking the enemy with all his strength with his shield. With just this blow, the monster apparently goes back to sleep, but wakes up and stands in the blink of an eye. Shouting, the leader asks Cheolmin to get ready for close combat while Yijay and Dongyuk attack from a distance. He then starts activating his skill, creating blue waves that appear everywhere. Unbothered, the creature keeps roaring, but the man confidently states that now he will finish it in aggressor mode. Using its paws, the Trudecker tries to punch the man, but only hits his shield. Suddenly, an arrow flies by and catches his attention, and the archer tells Yijin that it's time. From above, the girl starts shooting non-stop, successfully hitting the monster's face. Irritated, the creature decides to change its strategy, and curling up, it activates its armadillo mode. Hyum orders at that moment for Cheolmin to begin the melee attack. Behind the monster, the young man obeys immediately, and charges for a back attack while his leader attacks from the front. Striking the creature, the tanker orders everyone to maintain basic attacks until he gives the next command. The protagonist's friend, also attacking, says that just looking at the monster's back already makes him tired. Our boy is on the battlefield watching and listening to everything from a distance. By his side, the healer says that if this works, the hunt will end right there, then reveals that she wishes to join. Because true deckers don't appear often, only once or twice a year if someone is lucky. Chuck then asks how many times the team has faced one of those, and the girl says only 3 times in the last 5 months. Smiling, she says the boy seems very eager to learn more, and he apologizes for asking so much. The young woman then offers him a device and says it can help him. Called the Jeremy M7, the measuring device was developed by Jeremy Corp, and it will serve for him to observe and absorb everything he needs for the test the next day. Placing the device's lens over his eyes, our boy realizes that he can now analyze interesting stats. The young woman then says that for reference, a true decker has 30,000 health and its shield 150,000, which is quite impressive for a monster. Cook realizes that breaking the monster's shell is going to take forever. Suddenly, Hyungnim yells and says that they have a problem, because the life signals of the 4 members of the team on the other side have completely disappeared from the map. Hyung asks if he's saying that those members have been eliminated. Nervous, the protagonist asks if the information is accurate. In the distance, we can see that one of the structures has started shaking, causing large cracks in the walls. A giant hole opens with a loud crash, and everyone realizes it's the creature called Mantis, a giant praying mantis with claws full of strawberry juice. Seeing the creature approaching, our boy says that the situation is not good at all. Still in battle, the leader desperately asks how long until the monster reaches them. Sweet and cold, the blonde boy says at most 2 minutes or less. Shouting, the man orders Hook and Hyeso to get out of the area urgently and take cover. The protagonist finally understands why he had been feeling uneasy while hearing the orders. Taking action, he grabs the healer's hand, stating that they need to get out of there quickly. Panicking, the girl says she understands, but realizing that the boy is heading toward Hyung, she asks where he's going. Responding, he says that because of a short distance, getting out of there is practically impossible. The leader sees them approaching and asks why the boy isn't retreating as ordered. With his shield in hand, he says that's not an option because the monster is too fast, not to mention the presence of the true decker. So if the 2 monsters team up, things are going to get really ugly, and they will definitely be completely wiped out. Coming with blood in its eyes, the mantis prepares to attack with everything it has. Face to face with the monster, our boy says that in this case, all they can do is hold out as long as they can. Desperate, Hyung asks if the young man has gone crazy, since it seems like he thinks all awakened tankers are the same, forgetting that he's just a rookie. While they argue, a monster keeps grumbling in front of the 2. The leader then states that if a complete beginner who hasn't even gone through virtual combat attacks a mantis recklessly, his explanation is interrupted by the mantis, who gets tired of waiting and strikes. With nothing else to do, Huck tries to protect himself with his shield, while replying that either way, once he gets his registration card, he'll be going into live combat, which means tankers need to succeed no matter what, even being rookies. Quickly, our boy starts running while the mantis continues pounding on his shield. Jumping, the boy decides to fight back and attacks the monster's head, leaving the others shocked by his sheer determination. Cheol-min then says that he is an idiot because this is not just a simple test, but a real battle that could cost him his life. Unbothered, the protagonist says he knows that, but it's time for them to worry about something else, which is the true decker right behind them, because if it's not stopped, everyone there will be wiped out at once. The bear armadillo monster attacks the 2 young men mercilessly. Hyung puts his shield in front so he doesn't get hit directly, and asks Jung-hyuk to join the protagonist to buy time as a negotiator. Immediately obeying, the other young man joins our boy. Holding his shield with all his strength, the leader asks Cheol-min to stay and help him with that monster. Suddenly, the creature makes an unexpected move that ends up throwing the man far away. On the ground, he asks Ji-cheol to use a binding trap on the true decker urgently. Without hesitation, the boy does what was asked. The trap starts spinning toward the monster at high speed, binding its legs with chains when it gets close enough. Shouting, the boy says that it will last for 5 minutes. While getting up, the leader thinks that with that monster in front and the mantis behind, the only way out is blocked, which makes the situation desperate. With all his strength, Kuk uses his shield to attack and defend himself, accompanied by the other boy who shoots arrows every 5 seconds, but the blows have no effect on the giant mantis. Unable to give up, our boy strikes the creature once more, making it look at him with its glowing red eyes. Suddenly, something hits it straight in the head, surprising even our boy. From the top of the building, the archer praises Siu Yi-jin for the attack, but the girl says this is no time for compliments. The mantis quickly realizes where the blow that hit it came from, and determined, it starts retreating toward the girl. Huck shouts and tells the young woman to get out of there immediately, but she realizes that it may be too late, because the mantis's legs are already at her window. The young woman is hit directly, and the strike causes numerous injuries. Down below, the archer screams her name in desperation, while continuing to shoot arrows hoping to draw the monster's attention. Without success, he fears that everything is now lost. Worried, the healer next to the protagonist asks what she should do. Looking at his bracelet, our boy concludes that he was too careless because he forgot that he won't get stronger overnight. Besides thinking that using the shield attack twice would keep his artifact activated. Going through his system, he decides to check the options to prevent Yi Jin from passing away. Looking at the various pieces of information on his screen, he thinks that maybe he should use skills to increase the bracelet's effectiveness by 50%, which could be quite risky. With no other way, the boy decides to do it even if it costs too much. Waves of blue light begin radiating around his body, reaching the broken window where the mantis is about to enter and finish the girl, who is on the ground, injured and unable to escape. While Huck hopes with all his strength that his action will draw the monster back. Beside him, the young healer realizes that she needs to do something, because she won't be able to bear seeing her friend die without even trying to help. She runs off, leaving our boy alone. With nothing else to do, he looks ahead and realizes that his strategy worked. The team leader asks Yi Jin to leave the area, but Huck says the young woman will be fine. Hyun asks how he can say something like that, and our boy replies that he managed to make the monster leave her. Not believing it, the man asks what the boy is talking about, but he doesn't even answer because he is already charging at the mantis. While striking with his shield, he thinks that it is too risky to keep his ability activated with just basic attacks, concluding that he will need to use the copied skills because he has no choice. He activates the destructive body skill, along with the negotiator skill. The giant praying mantis almost hits him, but he manages to dodge with a jump. With the skills activated, Huck states that now his basic attack damage is comparable to that of a dealer. Suddenly, a sensation takes over his body. Smiling, he thinks that he has felt this many times before the regression, stating that it's as if all his cells have awakened just like it happened before he became a villain, and that it was this feeling that allowed him to rank 8th among the villains. The name of this sensation is hyperperception. Our boy goes back to attacking, now with his old sense activated, because of his strength when the mantis's legs starts to crack. Inside the building, Yi Jin is finally able to stand up, but when she tries to use her weapon, she ends up dropping the main part, the arrow, because of the nasty wound on her arm, which is making her lose a lot of strawberry juice and draining her strength. Suddenly, Haisu appears, surprising the young woman. Using her power, she begins healing her friend while asking her not to scream because it distracts her. The archer then says that she should be helping Kyuk instead of healing her wounds. But her friend says that the boy will be fine and that she can't do anything while his health is still full. Looking out the window, she says that Kyuk is crazy and looks just like the team leader since he hasn't taken any damage so far. We return to seeing our boy attacking, showing how truly strong he is, while Cheolmin and Hyun continue fighting against the True Decker. The creature roars in fury, but the team leader states that its shield won't last much longer. So the boy shouldn't waste time with basic attacks, but instead amplify his skills before the trap expires, and do it without worrying about him. The monster, which is almost free, prepares to strike the man. Shielding himself, he says that this was the attack he had been waiting for, just before the blow hits him. Hyung starts running to strike first while someone warns that the trap will only last 10 more seconds. Shouting, the man tells Cheolmin that the time has come. Understanding the message, the young man draws his weapon, then activates his critical attack on the panel. We can see a zigzagging blue beam of light coming from the monster's body while the young man prays for it to explode. His attack works, and the True Decker begins to crumble into dust. Hyung then shouts and informs the entire team that this side is clear. Standing in front of what was once the creature, the protagonist's friend spots a red crystal, and says that besides the item, he also got a skill card. Ending his happiness, the leader says that this is no time for that, and orders the boy to go help Hyuk. Our boy keeps striking non-stop, drawing green slime from the mantis. Seeing the scene, the man, who is also a tanker, asks how that is even possible. Looking back while fighting alone, the boy asks Cheolmin to get out of there if he's already done what he needed to do. Stopping from getting closer, the young man says that he really is crazy because besides fighting without help, he's now giving orders too. Agreeing with our boy, Hyun asks him to treat this as practical experience since he seems to be handling it well. Hyuk asks if he's sure, and the man says yes, then asks if anyone has anything against it. Everyone says they're in favor, but Yi Jin says she's not the type of person who can live with debts. Then attacks from the top of the building with an arrow, which ends up missing the mantis. Determined to finish the job, our boy jumps, ready to deliver a fatal blow, then drives his shield straight into the monster's head, which stops resisting and collapses to the ground. Mouth wide open, Hyung calls Cheolmin's attention and asks if he's absolutely sure that his friend awakened as a tanker. The day ends and night falls on the battlefield. We see the team leader asking everyone to hurry so they can get out of there quickly, since even knowing everyone is tired, if they stay too long, other monsters might end up showing up. Huck listens carefully while cleaning the green slime off his shield. Cheolmin approaches and asks if he's ever used that before. Confused, the boy asks what he's referring to. Explaining, the young man says he's talking about hyperperception because he knows he used it in tough fights back in school. Our boy doesn't answer, and his friend says there's no way he never used it after everything he did earlier. Then asks if the boy is okay since he used to get headaches after using the skill. Putting away his shield, the protagonist says he's fine and that it's probably because of the awakening. His friend says that he really is very lucky and owes him a beer, which must be drunk that night with no excuses. Seeing his phone ringing, Hyuk says it'll have to be another day because he needs to spend time with his siblings. Catching him by surprise, Hyung approaches and asks who he is and if he really awakened the day before, since there's no way someone could fight like that being just a rookie tanker. Turning around, the boy says maybe. Worried, Cheol-min tries to stop him from saying something stupid, but the boy simply says that since the situation was dire, maybe he released so much adrenaline that his strength became superhuman. Convinced it's a lie, the man asks if the boy really expects him to fall for that story. Our boy then decides to stay silent. The leader turns to the other members and says there's something he'd like to tell everyone, then states that on that day, Hyuk defeated a mantis alone but is not officially registered yet. So even though it was an emergency, if anyone finds out, the whole team could suffer consequences. That's why everyone must keep their mouths shut and not tell anyone about what happened that day. The archer smiles in relief at Hyung's words. Laughing, the other two guys say they're not stupid and will take what happened to the grave. Surprised, our boy calls the man, but he thanks him, leaving him more confused than before. Explaining, the leader says that if it weren't for him, everyone there would be dead, and that's why. He'll include him in the profit distribution as a tanker, of course. Mouth wide open, the boy asks if that doesn't mean the others will receive less than they expected. Haisu approaches and says he's right but knows that no one would complain. Smiling, she says that in any case, if someone does, the boy should let her know, because she'll immediately stop healing whoever is against it. Our boy's phone rings again and he says he needs to answer. Curious, the girl asks if it's his girlfriend. Smiling, the boy denies it and says it's just his siblings. But we find out he's lying because the one calling is the association, which leaves him intrigued because he has no idea why they are trying to contact him. We are taken to the association building. Inside a room, the boy asks why his test was moved forward. Responding, Jae-hoon says it's because the hunters dispatched to Thailand are returning that night. Not understanding, the boy asks what that has to do with anything. The man then explains that a C-rank monster appeared in Bangkok a week ago, which made hunters from other places be dispatched. But in that mission, Korea scored higher than Japan. So naturally, the association is focusing its attention on that. Thinking, Hyuk concludes that they just want to get rid of him quickly, stating out loud that he's ready to begin while the man apologizes for the change in plans. Explaining the test, Jae-hoon says it will be conducted as a simulated battle in a virtual combat room. Suddenly, a monster starts being generated in front of the boy, and he realizes it's similar to the simulation room before the regression. Interrupting his thoughts, the doctor warns that the monster he will face is a Xerus F rank and the test will last 1 hour. So the longer he holds out, the more points he earns. Looking back, the man asks the others if everything is ready. In the room with him are Hyung, a guy with glasses, and a woman with long hair. The three of them will be the judges for the test. Nodding, the tanker confirms that everyone is ready and the test can begin. Speaking again to the protagonist, Jae-hoon announces that the test has started. We see the monster charging straight at the boy, while he thinks about the information he received about the high-ranking hunters arriving at the association. Putting his shield in front of his body, he decides to begin an attack, causing the monster to retreat backward. Thinking again, Hyuk concludes that he needs to take the opportunity to copy the skill of one of the hunters who will arrive, while the monster smiles at him. Returning the smile, the boy thinks that if he plays this right, he will definitely succeed. But now he needs to focus on the test. Thinking about his super sense, he states that he could pass using just that. But with the average hunting time for that monster being 4 hours, if his stats in the Stage 3 test are better than those in Stage 2, he will definitely become suspicious to the association. Still with textbook-like movements, it's better that he fills the time without doing too much or too little to avoid drawing attention. 3 hours later, Jae-hoon realizes that the boy has only used the same movement, which wasn't what he expected given the confidence the boy showed before the test started. He looks at the judges, who continue watching, visibly impressed. Smiling, Hyung states that he is witnessing the birth of a super rookie after a very long time. The woman joins the conversation and says that the boy's aggression levels are quite stable. The guy with glasses then says that the most incredible thing is that the young man dodges attacks with minimal movement. Catching the attention of the two judges, the woman says she needs to go to the bathroom but will be back soon. She then leaves. Hyung says that he ate too much for breakfast and also needs to step out for a bit, leaving the man in a suit alone with the doctor in the room. Taking off his glasses, the man says that continuing the test doesn't really make much sense anymore. Jae-hoon starts sweating cold and asks if he's sure about that. Without saying anything else, the judge grabs his phone and says that he'll step out for a while too. Outside, we see that the woman is also on a call talking about Hyuk. Hyuk is also on the phone talking about how incredible the boy is, then asks the person on the line if they remember how textbook-like movements are actually the hardest. The other man with glasses also informs someone that the protagonist is extremely good. We see Hyuk still fighting the monster, while the man says that since there are 2 other guilds in play, they need to act first to make sure no one else can make a move. The test ends and the woman at the counter hands a document to the boy. Smiling, she says that this is his awakening registration certificate and praises him for the good work. Our boy takes the document and checks the information. The woman then says that getting a rank C on the first awakening is really incredible, and he asks why. She responds that it's something rare. since most people usually fall somewhere between rank F and E. Leaving the building, Hook wonders why he got rank C again if he didn't do anything special, deciding to be happy because at least now he has his registration, which means he can live a happy life doing things legally with his younger siblings. Suddenly, someone shouting catches his attention. Looking to the side, he sees a crowd of what appear to be fans screaming the names of their idols. A trio composed of 2 men and a woman appears, and Huck realizes they are the high-ranking hunters, being Jae-yun, a negotiator and second-class sorceress, Kim Yun-ho, who holds the national first ranking, and Lee Da-soo, who is first place in the tanker ranking. Next to Da-soo, the protagonist notices that he seems to be in a bad mood, and wonders if he should gather the courage and talk to the man. Smiling, he decides to go for it, no matter what happens. Our boy steps in front of the trio, surprising them. A little awkward, he says that he's also a fan, and that he's honored to meet them. Being friendly, Jae-yun asks if he would like an autograph, but the boy declines, leaving the girl embarrassed. He then says that actually he's a fan of Lee Da-soo. Irritated, the man asks what he's talking about, making our boy shrink and sweat even more as he thinks that now he's screwed. Leaning forward a bit, the man asks him to repeat what he just said, making him even more scared. Staring at the tanker, Hook wonders what that look means, because it definitely looks like a villain's stare. The man walks toward him and he wonders if this is when he's going to get beaten up. Looking even angrier, the man asks again what he just said. With no other choice, our boy states that he only said he was a fan of his. Lee Da-soo looks back and asks his companions if they heard that. Kim Yun-ho laughs and Jae-yun says they were so close, leaving the protagonist a little confused. The woman then says that if it weren't for that idiot who showed up, while the tanker says that now they know he has fans. We go back to 30 minutes earlier, where inside a limousine on the way to the association, the trio was having a conversation. Sitting, the negotiator recalls when someone approached saying they were a fan and Da-soo drove them away. And since then, she hadn't seen anyone else say they were his fan. Crossing her arms, she says she's never seen anyone like that, and that he knows she doesn't like men who lie. The man says he's not lying because, being who he is, of course, he also has fans. The woman then says that if someone says they're his fan when they arrive at the association, she'll do something he really wants. But if not, he'll have to help her with something. Curious, Da-soo asks what kind of help she wants. Explaining, the woman says that as he knows, the plan is to hunt a C-rank monster this time, but the guild doesn't have enough tankers. So if he loses the bet, he'll have to be the main tanker just once, but completely for free without receiving a single dime. We return to the present moment where the man smiles, having won the bet, and the woman scowls, having lost. Da-soo asks again if Huck is really his fan, while our boy wonders if he should run away. Surprisingly, the man extends his hand, saying that he'd like to sign something but doesn't have a pen, so he can only offer a handshake. Frozen, the boy wonders what's happening here, but decides to extend his hand and return the handshake in order to copy the man's ability. Da-soo then asks what his name is, and the boy introduces himself. Handing him a card, the man says he can call if he ever needs help. Kim Yun-ho joins the conversation and asks if the boy's name is really Hook. Still confused, he says yes. The man then smiles and introduces himself while also extending his hand. With a handshake, the boy copies the man's ability, and the man says that this is truly amazing, because he didn't expect to find a national treasure in that place. The tanker then asks what his friend is talking about. Hugging him, Kim Yun-ho says that someone who's his fan has to be considered a national treasure, and both step away because they need to hurry to speak with the president of the association. The woman stays behind and says that this is annoying. Huck approaches, saying that he's also her fan and would like a handshake, something he'll consider an honor for his whole life. But Jae-yun just turns her back and walks away, completely ignoring him. Intrigued, the boy thinks her personality is strange since earlier she even offered an autograph. And unable to get the last ability, he decides to leave, since he already got more than he needed. At the same time in New York at the American Awakened Association, one man asks another what they're looking at on the computer screen. Both are watching Huck's test, which after 3 hours had only consumed 3% of his life force. Curious, the bald man asks which country the boy is from, and the blonde man says he's from Korea. His partner, intrigued, asks if it could be a fake video, but the blonde man denies it, stating that they don't even know they're being monitored. He picks up the phone, but his friend asks him to wait, saying it's too early to inform the higher-ups. Paulo then asks Kevin if he knows how many rank S awakened there are now, then answering that there are only 5 who started as rank C, so all countries are watching this type of awaken closely. Kevin stays silent, and his friend says that if they lose this boy, they might be losing a future rank S talent. The screen shows intriguing results that should be investigated more deeply. A voice asks the partner to take a good look at the images. A building under a clear, sunny sky appears in the middle of quiet streets. Calmly, a man crosses the portal located at the top of the building. He approaches a door and touches the doorknob. While going down the stairs, he analyzes the evolution of his defense and resistance skills. According to the system, universal skills increase defense and significantly reduce damage. Shortly after, a scene of ancient ruins under a clear, peaceful sky can be seen. A terrifying monster seems ready to destroy its enemies. The The fighter prepares to use stun abilities with his shield. Soon after, he activates the skill Shield Stun, interrupting the enemy creature's attack. At that moment, the monster seems to feel the impact of the blow, and its strength becomes reduced. Realizing that the opponent has taken some damage, he shouts for Kim Yuho. Kim Yuho's unique abilities do not increase attack power. The system highlights all changes, showing increases in speed and evasion. A compliment is made for the impressive power of the lightning flash attack. Suddenly, the warrior performs an aerial attack while the creature tries to counterattack. With a quick strike, he lands a guaranteed critical hit right after teleporting into battle. At that instant, he manages to strike the monster's throat. The skill is activated and his movements become faster than light. A smile starts to form on the protagonist's face, who looks extremely satisfied. While walking down the stairs, he reflects on the incredible situation. The copied abilities from Lee Da-soo and Kim Yoo-ho were amazing beyond the ones he already had. By combining some of them, it would be possible to face monsters from beginner zones. Upon entering the apartment, he notices everything is quiet and peaceful. However, he starts to suspect that something strange is going on. Suddenly, he approaches and notices something on the countertop. With one of his hands, he touches the hamburger and realizes that everything is very cold. A thought starts forming in his mind. Suddenly, the girl opens the door of one of the rooms, waking up from a deep sleep. Confused, he looks back at the girl. She asks why he arrived so late. The protagonist asks Eum-jung if no one had dinner. Still tired, the girl replies that she thought it was a good idea to wait for him so they could all eat together. Realizing the situation, he tries to explain that she should have eaten. However, the girl says she wasn't hungry and he asks why. Her eyes fill with tears as she tells him that she had a nightmare where he died, and besides that, he wasn't answering his phone. While hugging him, she says she was very scared because she couldn't reach him. But the protagonist was fine and tried to comfort Yeonjung, who seemed extremely worried. Suddenly, another child appears, wearing his blue pajamas. The boy was also completely terrified because of his big brother's delay. Despite everything, now everyone could eat chicken together. The hero had promised that he would give more attention to the kids when he got back, but because of work, everything fell apart. The three sit around the table and start devouring the chicken like a happy family. Outside, it was already late, and the night dominated the environment. In bed, both children were already in a deep sleep. Meanwhile, the protagonist was fiddling with something on his phone. With the objective in hand, he was taking some photos and realized everything was ready. Now he just needed to register the product and wait for a potential buyer. Even so, he seemed a bit indecisive and observant. For him, it was a waste to sell only Karen's Blessing and Mountain Splitter. Slowly, his fingers approach the card, but he fails to acquire a new ability due to incompatibility with the user. Even so, he was willing to make a copy, but that didn't work either. At that moment, he realized he had no other option. Suddenly, he looks surprised as a message about core generation appears. The boy's head starts hurting instantly with the creation of a new function. According to the system, he gained additional points and new abilities. Without understanding anything, the noise started becoming louder and louder inside his mind. Carefully, he watches the loading of the core generation, which was at 1%. But he had no idea what that meant since he had never heard anything about it from Kikchul Hyunnim. Even so, he seemed anxious to discover what he would find at the end of that loading. The energy starts spreading completely throughout his body. With a thoughtful expression, he reflects on the sensation he had when awakening. The color of his eyes changes to a bright blue, and he decides the best thing to do is check his status. The destroyed buildings seem abandoned and uninhabited. In the middle of the street, a vehicle crosses the city's debris. Inside the vehicle, the hero uses the system to input a search term. The original system is divided into two systems, the master system and the copy system. The master system is the central system responsible for the derivative systems spread across the dimension. The system is not awakened, but rather an independent entity. Meanwhile, the copy system is an awakened system that only works with one user, being able to copy all abilities and also capable of recommending them to each other and creating new ones. The copies apply to all life forms with a derivative system, but the protagonist seemed not to fully understand. While climbing a few more floors, he reflected on all that information, thinking that he could copy abilities from monsters. After walking a long path, he finally reached his destination. To recover his strength, he decided to drink some water. In the end, he believed that the information was really useful, reflecting on its functionality. Shortly after, he decides to open his status window. The user Choi Jun-yuk, 25 years old, was in the class Copy Master, and his core was at level 1 with some power increases. At that moment, he noticed some changes in the status window. The details on the screen listed his abilities, additional points, and attributes, and he also noticed the creation of a new status. With a smile on his face, Choi Jun-hyuk watches the activation of the All-Stars plus 100 auction from the Twilight Bracelet, boosting his stats. He was happy with the status increase and curious to check the core. The recharge point was probably the amount that could be charged. In a moment of reflection, he thinks that the power consumption could mean that more than 20,000 could be used. If the bracelet options were added, he could produce everything with great efficiency. However, he knew that the most curious thing was that the stats were only at level 1. His hope was to believe that with the level increase, the stats would also grow. Suddenly, he hears a strange sound coming from the lower part of the building. His feet quickly move toward the edge of the building. At that moment, he notices something unusual and tries to draw attention to himself. Walking through the streets of the destroyed city was a powerful monster. Without wasting time, he opens the city map to observe every corner. As expected, there was no one living in the surroundings, making the place perfect for the test. Meanwhile, the creature's expression showed all its discontent. Choi Jun-hyuk didn't waste time and ran to the parking lot to observe more closely. Apparently, his enemy had no eyes but seemed extremely powerful. Standing still, the boy waited for the best opportunity to start the fight. His eyes change color and he activates his power weapon. According to the system, he could choose the type of weapon to be used, such as a spear, a sword, or a dagger. The creature was already losing its patience and started letting out a scream. Its feet began moving toward the protagonist. The best thing to do would be to summon the longbow to fight against that powerful enemy. Suddenly, the weapon begins to form in his hands. At that moment, the protagonist starts to understand why Park Gang-ho was so strong. But there was no time for reflective thoughts since his opponent was coming at full force. Choi Jun-hyuk prepares his bow and assumes an attack position. The arrow flies toward the monster's face, hitting it precisely. Using his weapon, he fires quick and critical shots. With determination in his eyes, he realizes he had maximized not only the core but everything else. Meanwhile, his opponent was being attacked in various ways and could not hold back desperate screams. Shortly after, the creature starts losing what little balance it still had. But Choi Jun-hyuk wanted to continue the fight, so he runs toward his opponent. With a jump, he asks the system to switch to the longsword. Smiling, he seems extremely confident, thinking that he had inherited Park Gang-ho's complete abilities. Getting closer to the creature, he grips his sword tightly. In the end, his goal was to become as strong as his hero. With one strike, he directs his movements toward the body of the horrendous creature. Shards could be seen all over the dark night as the monster lay fallen. The protagonist seems very satisfied with that fight for defeating his enemy. Looking at his phone, he realizes that an hour and 20 minutes had already passed. However, he believed it was very late, and if he were to consider all the other demons in the vicinity, it would take another 30 minutes. Suddenly, he notices that his phone was ringing. Looking at the screen, he sees that it was the Agreements Association. Confused, he wonders if he should answer the call due to the late hour, but he seems very curious to find out who was calling. On the other side, a woman introduces herself as Kim Joo-hee from the reception team. Without saying exactly what she needed, she asks if the boy was awake. Kim Joo-hee explains that she received a sudden call from the secretary's office. Upon hearing that the president of the association wanted to have a private meeting with him, Jun-hyuk notices the appearance of the monster. Without losing focus on the call, he tries to gather more information about the meeting. Before setting a time, he needed to know when the president would arrive. The receptionist informs him that his schedule was the same as every day at 7 a.m. At that moment, the clock showed 6:20 a.m., but the protagonist would be at the designated place at 7 a.m. Meanwhile, the monster was getting closer and closer. Without prolonging the subject, Jun-hyuk was sure that he could arrive in 30 minutes. Hanging up his phone, he turned all of his attention to a new challenge. With intense footsteps, the creature was quickly approaching. Wielding his shield, he activated the stun charge. The aberration's attack was immediately interrupted. With his eyes glowing again, he advances using the lightning strike. Suddenly, he manages to reach his enemy's back by being faster than light. Upon touching its skin, he receives the option to copy the ability of the lowest-ranking soldier of the Vargos race. Without wasting time, he accepts and lets the system handle everything. With a jump, he lands back on the ground. Shortly after, the skill copy was already fully complete. Using the power of his voice, the warrior asks to open the subspace. A bright and colorful energy, probably from a C-grade crystal, appears before him, indicating that something important was detected. With the crystal in his hands, he could absorb it to raise the core's level. At the same moment, the absorption of the C-grade crystal is initiated. The energy begins to spread throughout the protagonist's body. Inside his mind, his only thought was to raise the core level to save time. With the complete transformation, Choi Jun-hyuk was curious about what kind of fight awaited him. Meanwhile, the sun's rays spread across the landscape. Shortly after, the protagonist passes through a portal, returning to an urban area. Looking at his phone, he thinks that with that growth rate, he would be able to significantly reduce the time until the second awakening. The clock shows 6:55 in the morning. A sound starts forming in the young man's stomach. Alone, he begins to notice hunger spreading throughout his body. Soon after, he finds himself in an elevator next to a woman. Opening the system, he decides to check the details of the newly copied skill. With an expression of curiosity and confusion, he seems unable to understand the recognition of the lowest-ranking soldier. Following the explanation, the recognition would be made by the lowest-ranking soldiers of the Vargos race, who would not attack him. Leaving the elevator, he keeps reflecting on that kind of attack prevention. While following the secretariat, he thought it would be a powerful skill to use when alone. The woman stops and opens a heavy door. With a friendly expression, she asks the boy to enter the room. The gray-haired man in a suit seems very pleased to see Choi Jun-hyuk. Even with some shyness, the boy calmly enters the room. The chief asks him to sit in the chair and make himself comfortable. Smiling, he asks if he could speak informally with the protagonist. Not seeing it as a bad situation, he immediately agrees since the man seemed to be doing that from the start. First, he shows that he is impressed with the boy's punctuality. The president of the association seems not to understand when Jun-hyuk starts mentioning all the tasks he performed for his siblings. For a moment, the two remain silent, just exchanging glances. But shortly after, the chief starts laughing out loud. Despite everything, he believed the boy's words were less of a joke. Changing the subject, he decides to get straight to the main point. Meanwhile, the hero waits attentively for the formulation of the sentence. Without wasting time, he reports that the association wanted to make a proposal. The president wanted the young man to refuse all recruitment offers from foreign guilds and stay in Korea. Thoughtful, the warrior says nothing and analyzes the situation. Contrary to the gray-haired man's expectations, he informs that he had never received any offer to join a foreign guild. According to the research, major guilds from the United States were showing interest in recruiting Jun-hyuk. That information seemed completely new to the boy. Despite feeling embarrassed, the president admits that the test data was hacked and the information might have reached the guilds. Believing that all of this was a complete misunderstanding, the young man asks if people knew about his rank. Without wasting time, the man responds that everyone was aware of it. However, Choi Jun-hyuk did not believe that being rank C was something so impressive, as he was only a first awakener. The second awakeners were classified as rank C due to certain statistics. In the end, the protagonist felt there was nothing different about himself compared to them. Choi Jun-hyuk does not know how to react to the facts presented. Focused, the man says that by maximizing the second awakening, he could aim for rank straight away. The protagonist thinks that with the second awakening secured, he could have abilities comparable to a third awakener and even have a chance at rank S. Considering the boy's abilities, he was extremely valuable, and the association believed that was highly attractive. Therefore, they couldn't just stand by and watch someone so talented be taken away. While receiving a notebook from the secretary, he informs that he had prepared 3 conditions. First, he would receive an initial support fund of 1 billion. Second, total tax exemption limited to his group. Lastly, he would receive 2 parts of an A-rank equipment set provided completely free of charge. Handing him a pen, the president states that the contract period would last until the second awakening. Now, Choi Jun-hyuk had only one mission: accept the conditions and sign the contract. But the protagonist seems suspicious, reminding them that he was only a rank C. Despite hearing the proposal, he informs that he was not convinced. All that support offered just to prevent him from moving to another city seems suspicious, so he wanted to know if there were other conditions. Suddenly, the president stands up from his chair, realizing that the boy was very observant. The association's condition was that he could not naturalize in another country during the contract period. Leaning on the table, he explains that the young man could not join a guild and should consult them to participate in expeditions. Additionally, if the association requested the boy's participation in a raid, he would have to prioritize it under any circumstances. In other words, no kind of obstacle would be allowed between Choi Jun-hyuk and the association. In the end, no guilt of the warrior's own choosing. These were the final conditions, but he would have little time to consider the proposal. The president informs that the offer would expire the moment he contacted other guilds. However, the protagonist seemed to perfectly understand the situation and signed the contract. Confused, the man in the suit offered some time for him to think, but the young man was determined and already knew his goals. With determination, the two shake hands, sealing the deal. Outside, the city is bustling with people walking everywhere. In a restaurant, a girl examines the menu options with an employee. Suddenly, a child gets excited upon realizing they are in a big shopping mall. Choi Jun-hyuk had brought his 2 siblings for a family outing. Excited, the boy asks if he could look at some t-shirts. Yeon-jung seems worried about all the noise from her brother. The hero is having fun. Both are amazed to hear that they could choose a few items to buy. With a smile on his face, the hero says his siblings could choose the 10 items they liked the most. Happiness spreads across the children's faces as they celebrate together. Everything was happening in an unexpected way, but he knew he had to wait until the end of the protection period. Choi Jun-hyuk was worried about possible problems along this journey. Suddenly, Yeon-jung shows her brother a beautiful blue dress. Eun-chul immediately likes the outfit and says his sister should get it. An employee approaches and asks the children not to touch the clothes on display like that. Meanwhile, Jun-hyuk reflects on the list of things he should do, relating it to past events. At that moment, he tells the employee not to worry about anything since he would be buying the clothes. Either way, before completing that list, he had absolutely no intention of leaving Korea. Suddenly, a warning for shoppers informs that an unexpected gate has opened inside the mall. The information is repeated once more, showing the real situation to the customers. Additionally, they ask everyone to stay calm and follow the staff's instructions. Amid the crowd, a woman reports that hunters from Taebaek would be arriving soon. According to the orders, everyone should stay inside the mall, but customers already wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Outside, everything was even more dangerous, and the best thing to do was to follow the woman for a safe evacuation. Suddenly, chaos takes over the place as people start running in desperation. Choi Jun-hyuk observes the situation that was about to unfold, feeling the tense atmosphere. Being a hunter, he was willing to check what was happening, but asked the employee to take care of his siblings. Yeon-jung seems extremely worried about his safety. warning that it was very dangerous out there. According to the young man's memories, there were 5 D-rank monsters near the store. That day, a building collapsed due to the monsters that followed the refugees into the large shopping mall. His hands begin to tremble, feeling anger about everything happening at that moment. He crouches down and asks Yoonjeon to take care of her brother Euncheol. Knowing that the Taebaek Guild would only arrive after all the destruction, he leaves determined to face the monsters. In the end, he would have to endure the situation completely alone, anxiously waiting for reinforcements. The arrival of the monsters causes complete despair in the streets. Calmly, an officer tries to guide people to take shelter inside the mall. The atmosphere becomes tense with people fighting among themselves, trying to rush even more. Meanwhile, the monsters start spreading throughout the city. There were 5 in total, ready to destroy everything in their path. Upon hearing the screams, the creatures begin to look around. People keep running in terror, pushing each other. Choi Jun-hyuk stands in the middle of the group, letting everyone pass quickly by him. At that moment, despair takes over his face as he realizes he was completely alone. The giants were coming toward him, and he no longer knew the best way to defend himself. With a tense expression, he decides to open the subspace. Beside him, a portal is formed for him to choose his abilities. A terrifying aura spreads through the air, showing all the fury present in the creature. The young man could not let any of them pass. He had to protect his brother at all costs. According to his shield, it was ready to take down each of his enemies. With the swift movement activated, he would trick the opponent with quick movements. The strike manages to hit the opponent's leg with tremendous force. Upon feeling the attack, the creature lets out a powerful scream of pain. Using his speed to his advantage, he moves throughout the area, confusing his enemies. Suddenly, he stops running and observes the situation. Those abominations follow the protagonist's movements and turn their bodies. Jun-hyuk provokes his opponents, calling them to fight. The 5 seem irritated by that boy's arrogance. Without wasting time, they start running toward their small target. On a street, vehicles pile up in the middle of the city traffic. A man grows increasingly angry, realizing that the vehicle wouldn't move. The street had been blocked because of the cars trying to leave, and not even the police were managing the situation. Irritated, he realizes this was a terrible time to be stuck in traffic. Suddenly, he feels a hand on his shoulder. His colleague tries to calm Dasu in every possible way. The fight happening in the city was being broadcast live. At the center of it all, Jun-hyuk was trying to hold off the creatures using all his skills. Filming the fight, a young man tells viewers that he was impressed by the courage of the unknown fighter. Inside the car, the men watch the broadcast on their phone attentively. At that moment, the memory of the young man comes instantly to Dasu's mind. Without wasting time, he informs that he knew the young man who was fighting completely alone. His colleague asks who that guy was, seeming very curious to know his identity. With a smile on his face, Dasu says the boy was his fan. Confused, his friend seems not to understand what he was talking about. The man explains that upon returning from Thailand, he met a fan at the association but couldn't remember his name. Meanwhile, the young man tries to stream the best moments of the fight, risking his life. He knew that if the unknown fighter died, he would be next. With his equipment, he continues reporting, showing all his professionalism in ignoring the danger to record the urgent situation. In the end, the young man asks his followers to be generous and make donations. The comments reveal the viewers' shock as they discuss frantically. One of them claimed that even Dasu would be incapable of fighting like that. Upon reading that comment, the man becomes extremely confused and bothered by the doubts about his abilities. Without wasting any time, he immediately gets out of the vehicle. Meanwhile, his friend looks worried and seems not to understand his movements. However, Dasu was determined to study people in any way. With determination on his face, nothing could stop his goals. He gets out of the car, leaving his colleague completely alone. At that moment, people begin to follow the master immediately. One of the warriors asks the man to step aside, who seems not to understand the situation. Suddenly, all the warriors were beside Dasu and ready for battle. His final order is for Jo Hwan-woo to investigate who that new face was. Without knowing his name, he warns that he wouldn't get much information, but the chief remembered the identity, Kim Jun-hyuk. In the end, the captain wanted to know if all members were ready for battle. Their expressions reveal a determination to protect the people and the city by following the master's orders. Now, everyone could head straight into the battle together. Hearing the command, they all start running toward the fight. Like a fierce blow, one of the monsters tries to hit the warrior, but he is faster and manages to dodge with all his acquired skills. Even so, the impact causes him to fall to the ground. His face is already covered in sweat due to the intense fight. In his thoughts, he begins to pray for some kind of help since the fight was unfair. This was the best opportunity to use the super sense. In every way, he tries not to be reckless and avoids the most difficult strikes. His enemies were terrifying and completely insane, besides being powerful abominations. Jun-hyuk tries to run as fast as possible, but he knows that facing 2 monsters at once was anything but simple. He starts to slow down and stops near the creature's claws. With a roar, the monster seems to observe the best chance to attack. At that moment, the protagonist realizes that his plan worked, successfully tricking the opponent. However, he notices an unusual situation and becomes completely confused. With a surprise attack, the opponent tries to use its giant paw to trample him. Daesu arrives with his team all ready to help as much as possible. The powerful shield protects his face as he gets closer and closer with the stun enhancement activated. Gathering all of his strength and skills, he manages to deliver a powerful blow. The creature is completely disoriented, not understanding where the strike came from. Junhyuk is amazed to see his idol sharing the same battle with him. His orders are for Kim Do-hoon and Jang Soo-jong to take care of two Karhan. Jae-hwan would be responsible for checking if there were other survivors around. Duo was assigned to heal Choi Junhyuk and stay with him until the end of the fight. While settling on the ground, the boy questions the delay of the guild master. Noticing that the boy kept chattering, Daesu realizes that he could fight against two more monsters. After being completely healed, the protagonist would have the mission to fight with a group for the defense of the city. Meanwhile, Duel spreads his powers throughout the boy's body. Instead of attracting aggro again to buy time, the best thing to do was for Junyi to enter tanking mode and defeat them quickly. Handing over the shield, Daesu wants to make sure the boy understands his plan. The more time was wasted, the greater the damage. From afar, they could notice another creature approaching. Now the two are ready to fight side by side. The Kargan runs toward them, increasing its speed more and more. In the underground shelters, people tried to hide from the danger. The broadcast announced that the Taebaek Guild had already arrived at the scene but hadn't managed to defeat any Karhan. Yeonjung seemed very worried while listening to that information. The employee immediately notices the little girl's fear. Calmly, Unchul asks her not to be afraid since the situation would be controlled quickly. The two continued discussing Choi Junhyuk's safety when new reports appeared. Finally, the group of hunters was able to defeat the first Karhan. Everyone in the shelter celebrates that news with great excitement. The children are also happy to realize they are winning the fight. Very curious. Unchul starts walking to try to see what was happening. The employee stops him from going outside, informing him that it was extremely dangerous. Before she could grab the boy, he starts running. Soon after, another Kargan is eliminated by the group. Now only 3 were left. The two men hug and celebrate the victory while noticing messages from countless people around the world. They discuss the efficiency of the Taebaek Guild and also question the identity of the rookie. For almost an hour, he had the power to hold off the 5 monsters. Unchul approaches the men and informs them that the hunter was his older brother. The boy was extremely proud to see all of Choi Junhyuk's abilities. Outside, it was already night, and everything was darker with street lamps illuminating the roads. The war was still not over, and the warrior was running everywhere holding his shield. With a jump, he tries to divert the Karhan's attention. His weapon transforms into something sharp enough to completely finish off the abomination. After 7 hours since the start of the fight, everything had finally ended. Meanwhile, Junhyuk realizes that he was extremely tired. Now he could rest, feeling as if he would collapse at any moment. Daesu thanks the boy for the great work he had done. Choosing his words carefully, he asks the young man something unusual. The guildmaster wanted to know if Junhyuk was the first awakener who recently received a C-rank classification. At that moment, the protagonist pulls himself together, realizing this was a serious conversation. In the end, the man questions whether the young man could be somehow irregular. The protagonist seems confused by that question. Suddenly, a voice calls for the brother. People leave the shelter, including his siblings and the employee. Noticing the presence of his family, he calls out to them. The children run toward their brother, safe and sound from any danger. They share a warm hug after all the desperation they had gone through. Junhyuk seems proud of his younger siblings, who behaved perfectly. At that moment, Daesu receives privileged information about the boy. However, there was nothing suspicious in the research. Meanwhile, the hero puts the problems aside, enjoying the moment of joy. Before going home, they would stop to buy some chicken. Unchul seemed excited, but Yeonjung wanted to eat something different. In the end, Junhyuk said they could eat whatever they wanted. Suddenly, the presence of the employee who had been observing the whole scene. The woman thanks him for the hard work and for protecting her and all her colleagues. However, the hero says that he should be the one thanking her for taking care of his siblings. In a surprising act, the woman hugs him. Tears stream down her face as she becomes increasingly grateful for his actions. Choi Junhyuk's face turns red with embarrassment. Shortly after, all the residents noticed the presence of the famous transition hunter. The comments stated how handsome and truly charming he was in person. People begin pushing to get close and thank the hero who saved everyone in the city. Even so, he didn't seem to understand how everyone knew his identity. The sky full of clouds shows a peaceful day ahead. Inside the office, the television displayed the main news from Seoul, including the appearance of the 5 S-rank monsters. The report shows the team that defended the city and also mentions Choi Junhyuk. In the end, they announced that his ranking was given unanimously with the highest score by the judges. Suddenly, the president of the association appears to bother the new celebrity. However, the warrior didn't like that kind of joke and asks not to be teased. The man asks with a bit of curiosity if the young man was busy dealing with the fame from the gate incident. Since that morning, he had been receiving calls from people trying to recruit him, but the association had already handled everything. The boy could contact the president if necessary due to the torment caused by the battle. Changing the subject, the man informs him that the government and several authorities were saying the young man was irregular. Apparently, they had something that broke the conventional ranking rules. However, they were considered a type of mutant not stronger than an S rank. Choi Jun-hyuk asks if he would have to register. The best thing to do would be to register in the United States to receive government support. Many had applied as irregulars, but only 3 had managed to be officially registered. Furthermore, the whole process wouldn't be easy, and with 2 siblings to care for, leaving Korea wasn't an easy decision. Now the 2 could discuss the contract with the association, which would increase the support given to Choi Jun-hyuk. Since the last contract was written with the perspective of him being a rookie, the association decided to propose terms suited for an irregular. Confused, the warrior asked them to wait for confirmation that he was indeed an irregular, but that wouldn't be necessary. First, the support funds would be increased to 5 billion with the same tax reduction rate. The number of A-rank equipment rentals would be raised to 5, in addition to providing a top-tier hunting vehicle. However, the conditions remain the same with no further concerns. Choi Jun-hyuk seems confused by the whole suspicious situation. Even so, the president tries to understand the reason behind the boy's suspicious look. At that moment, he asked about the hunting vehicle. He wanted to know if it could be arranged for the same day. On the highway, a white vehicle starts accelerating rapidly. A voice announces that it was Daesu, the tanker from the Taebaek Guild. Driving his new car, Jun-hyuk calls the master. The man had informed him that the boy could contact him if he ever needed any kind of help. However, his real goal was to meet with him if possible. Opening the subspace, the 2 arrange the meeting for that very moment. The portal opens and the protagonist places his hand in that powerful energy, stating it would take about 10 minutes to arrive. In his hands, he holds one of the cards, trying to understand the setup. Previously, he decided not to sell Kiran's Blessing and Mount Splitting because they were extremely valuable. Instead of exchanging the cards for money, he tried to acquire the abilities, but the action wasn't completed due to user incompatibility. With the gate incident, all the attention that was supposed to be on Daesu was now directed at Choi Jun-hyuk. That's why he had prepared a small gift for the man who was responsible for saving his life. It was a Mount Splitting Tanker skill card. At that moment, Daesu was shocked at the mention of the card since there were only 9 like it in the entire world. However, the user would need to be extremely careful when using the card, trying to prevent damage. The protagonist seems optimistic about offering his colleague the valuable equipment for a reasonable price, but he had second intentions, wanting a small favor in return. Curious, Daesu asks what the young man could possibly need. As soon as he learned to use the skill, Jun-hyuk simply wanted a handshake. Shortly after, they are in a beautiful and organized office. Carefully, the hero shows the valuable card that would be given as a gift. Daesu can't believe he's seeing that precious item live, an item worth at least around 40 billion. However, in an auction, the item could be worth much more than that. That's why the man couldn't understand what was driving the boy to sell the card for a lower price. In his mind, the justifications didn't make sense. But the seller had already made his decision, and besides, he would end up learning the skill anyway. Selling to a stranger seemed much worse than handing the card to someone he respected. Being the first awakener, he could use it anyway, but the ranking didn't match. The 2 men seemed to reflect on that proposal. Suddenly, they begin discussing the amount of money they had, reaching 20 billion. Daesu asks if the boy preferred to receive the payment in cash or in exchange for some item. At that moment, he reflects on the possibility of receiving new equipment. Soon after, the 3 are in front of a large glass-covered building. The selling price of the building was 42 billion, and they ask if the young man was interested in that kind of deal. However, he reflects on the possibility of becoming a building owner. Beside him, the guild master starts a conversation. With a smile on his face, he asks if the boy liked the building. Suspicious, he reflects on the proposal and doesn't answer the question. In the end, they stop wasting time, and the boy accepts the building in exchange for the skill card. The master seems extremely satisfied with his new acquisition. Suddenly, his body is enveloped by a powerful energy that takes over the environment. Happiness overflows in Jun-hyuk's eyes as he watches the scene attentively. The system confirms that the hunter successfully acquired the skill without any problems. Now in Asia, together with Wang Weichong from China, Lee Daesu was the only tanker to learn the Mount Splitting skill. Additionally, his Asian ranking was about to rise as well. The 2 shake hands, sealing the deal. Curiously, the master asks what the young man would do from now on with his new building. According to his plans, he was trying to start some kind of work as a mercenary. For now, his priority was to hunt safely in the beginner zones. Even with all the money, he couldn't forget that they lived in a dangerous world, and he had to take care of his siblings. His parents died during the Great Catastrophe, and they went through hard times. Because of that, the childhood of the 3 was a terrible nightmare not worth remembering. His only wish was that his siblings' future wouldn't be a nightmare like the past. Jun-hyuk wanted to give them a life free of financial difficulties, full of hope and freedom. Lee Dae-soo watches the wise boy carefully and feels touched by his life story. Contradicting his dreams, a hunter informs that a life like that would be impossible. The Great Catastrophe was only the beginning, and the world was slowly heading toward complete destruction. Monster invasions were becoming more frequent and combat resources were running out. Above all that, there were villains in the dangerous city, assassins, and thieves. In recent days, there had been a series of murders targeting hunters in the Gangnam area. The suspect was said to be a famous villain who operated in Daegu. His name was Shijin Soo. Dae-soo couldn't believe that they had to fight monsters while also dealing with humans. That's why he stated that his colleagues' siblings didn't need that building. They needed a world without monsters or awakeners like them. Meanwhile, everything was silent around a small structure. The injured soldier anxiously awaited the return of the association. In the darkness, a hooded man starts to appear. Immediately, the soldier recognizes the infamous Chijin-su. With a smile on his face, he states that as a villain, he operated in various areas like Daegu. At that moment, the fighter realizes he was in serious trouble. The assassin starts mocking the man, saying he had been completely abandoned by his comrades. However, the warrior wastes no more time and charges toward the villain, raising his weapon. But the villain is faster and manages to dodge the strike. Soon after, he lands a precise attack on his enemy's stomach. Quickly, the man falls to the ground, feeling intense pain throughout his body. Chijin-su knew that the soldier had requested reinforcements, so he couldn't stay there too long. Curiously, he asks if the guy knew someone named Choi Jun-yuk, but the man doesn't answer his questions and simply tells him to go to hell. Realizing that the soldier didn't know the target, he lands another blow to his throat. The assassin seems to enjoy every moment with a wide grin on his face. After claiming another victim, he turns to leave. Before departing, he decides to check something on his phone. The images of the fight against the 5 monsters were displayed on his phone. With his face completely covered in blood, he seems to reflect before deciding. Unexpectedly, he clicks the like button on the video. At that moment, his expression changes completely, and he starts laughing intensely and menacingly. 1 week later, in the beginner hunting area of Goyang City, a terrifying monster appeared and was ready to claim some victims. Using all his strength, the boy manages to stop the attack. That was the last prey for today. From a distance, spectators watch the fight. The man holds his position as the creature approaches. Nearby, a fighter defends himself with a bow and arrow. Suddenly, the young men find themselves inside the arena. Touching his companion's arm, he informs him that it was time for the final strike. Upon hearing the command, the boy seems determined to finish the fight. Suddenly, he starts running, accelerating more and more. With his unique skill Power Strike, level 1, he charges his weapon with strength to unleash a powerful attack. The energy starts to pour out from all directions, causing movement around. Quickly, the enemy's body is engulfed in intense flames. Gradually, it completely disintegrates. At that moment, Jung-yuk is informed that there was only one Karhan left to be finished. Without wasting time, he delivers a final blow and runs toward the other monster. Even with its twisted arm, the creature seems ready to attack. At that instant, the man calls Seo Yijin's attention. Without delay, the archer realizes the situation and decides to intervene. With her weapon, she aims at the monster's head and fires. The arrow is so fast and powerful that it pierces through the aberration's skull. In that battle mode, it took 2 hours and 20 minutes to be completed. All alone, it took much less. However, there was nothing he could do due to the noise about the irregulars. Shortly after, the man in the armor comes down to congratulate Jun-yuk. Thanks to him, the hunt was extremely easier than expected. The young man was extremely grateful for the invitation to join the battle, but his companion was very impressed with the boy's progress, who had become an irregular and a mercenary. However, his plans were more ambitious, and he aimed to organize a guild. His goal was to learn as much information as possible from that experienced warrior. A guild and a team were extremely different things. But the boy made the man reflect by saying they were quite similar in terms of organization. In that case, he began to completely change his opinion. With an unexpected proposal, he offered the opportunity to be in charge of the team this time. Confused, the protagonist seemed not to understand the meaning of that. As a leader, he had been leading the team, but now he was planning to graduate from the beginner's zone. The man informs that he couldn't stay in that zone forever, and the perfect person to take the position was Choi Jun-yuk. Moreover, since it was not a guild, he would be able to gain a lot of experience. The girl states that everyone owed their lives to the boy, so he was much more than qualified. The young man beside her agrees with the statement, saying he was very grateful for the help received in the battle. The leader realizes that 2 members had already agreed with that possibility, and upon questioning the others, they seemed happy with the protagonist's leadership. Now Choi Jun-yuk was officially in charge of the team's leadership position. Even confused, the people around him trusted his potential and the good he represented in society. His only duty would be to make choices that benefited everyone. Before leaving, the former leader informs about the presence of a villain who was killing hunters. The association had been trying to form a team for some time, but the best thing to do was to keep emergency contacts in case it was necessary one day. Now they seem excited to have some drinks and chat, but his idea is interrupted when he doesn't notice that the protagonist had to answer an important call. On the other end of the line, someone mentioned his brother Euncheol. The conversation seemed long and endless, but he was understanding every word. Upon hanging up, his colleague asks the reason for his serious tone. At that moment, the young man informs that the drinks would have to wait for now. Not understanding the real situation, the man in the armor seems very confused. Meanwhile, the school seems quiet with no students walking around. Inside the classroom, Jun-yuk talks with a teacher. With concern, she explains that in recent days, Euncheol couldn't keep focus in class and was fighting with his friends. The reason for the contact was that the situation was getting worse and worse. His brother doesn't like knowing that Euncheol is fighting at school. However, she explains that the children's arguments were turning into small fights. The child explained to the teacher that the reason for the fights was because he wanted to become stronger like his father. Junhyuk is shocked to hear that they say he would awaken as a tanker and become as strong as his father. At that moment, the hunter realizes that scolding and giving warnings was not the best way to educate. Realizing the situation created, the teacher tries to end the conversation in the best way possible. With clarity in her eyes, she asks the young man in front of her for a favor. Periodically, the school asks parents to be teachers for a day, and on that occasion, the presence of the hunter Choi Junhyuk would be a good way to explain the profession and tell stories. Currently, the children were interested in the hunter profession, and he should talk about the dangers and difficulties. In the end, the teacher believed it would be a good experience for the students. Meanwhile, Unchul was alone in a hallway. Shortly after, his brother leaves the classroom. Looking to the side, he starts staring at the boy with curiosity. Before he could say anything, the boy was already apologizing for his actions. He explains that he fought because his classmates didn't believe that his brother was the tanker from television. He was called a liar because they believed he couldn't have a brother like that since he had no living parents. Noticing the boy's distress, Junhyuk reached out his hand. The child's feelings were real and his brother was not angry. With a smile on his face, he asks him to bring his friends later to eat something delicious. At that moment, Munchul's eyes fill with tears. The child quickly runs into his older brother's arms. Choi Junhyuk is confused by his reaction, not understanding anything. Looking at the city, he thinks there was no way to stop his younger brother from becoming a hunter. If he was destined for that, in the end, he would become one just like Junhyuk himself became a villain. The desire for a hopeful life seems very distant at that moment. He quickly remembers Dasu's words. The great catastrophe was really only the beginning, as the world was destined for destruction. Besides the more frequent appearances of monsters and the decreasing resources, villains were a threat. Choi Junhyuk reflects on his friend's thoughts and the necessary items for his brothers. In the end, the world shouldn't have monsters or even awakened ones like him. Shortly after, he activates the teleportation magic circle. As he crosses the portal, he is certain that a world without monsters and awakened ones is truly impossible. The other side of the portal forms near a white vehicle. Crossing the circle, he reflects on how it would be possible to protect his brothers from all the evil in the world. His greatest fear was dying while fighting against monsters. He gets into the car, turns on the headlights, and is ready to drive. Besides that, he didn't want to end up in prison like before. Starting the car, he accelerates down the highway. Unfortunately, he knew that his brothers would have to learn to fend for themselves. While driving, he makes a mysterious phone call. The protagonist was calling Haisu because he needed a favor. He wanted to know if there were hunters frequently patrolling the Gangnam area. Before any response, the beginner zone should be monitored. Shortly after, Haisu reports that the order has been fulfilled. The team led by the tanker Cho Ju-sung is currently hunting near the four-way intersection in Gangnam. At that moment, the hero was already inside the area, observing all the city's destruction. Getting out of the car, he doesn't give further details about the reason for needing that information. He only explains that his team was planning to head to the Gangnam area soon. In the end, he believes it might seem strange and look like they were trying to steal the territory. Ready to hang up, he thanks for the help and says he will stay in touch. Once settled in the location, he starts mapping the area in awakened search mode. If he couldn't give his brothers a normal world, he would make sure to eliminate all the cockroaches destroying the world. When he had to do something, he used all his determination to complete the challenges. Suddenly, he notices the perfect target in one of the buildings, Shijin-su. The man uses his weapon to aim perfectly. With one touch, he releases the arrow in the desired direction. The projectile gains strength as it travels through the air. Shortly after, the arrow pierces the heart of the warrior who was fighting against monsters. Noticing the attack coming from behind, blood gushes from his mouth. Suddenly, a voice sounds confused, trying to understand what just happened on the battlefield. With an earpiece, he can hear all the conversations. Shojin-su seems to enjoy every second of that situation, no matter how horrendous it was. For him, the death of a tanker wasn't reason enough for everyone else to flee. While preparing, he hears a threatening voice. He quickly turns his body and tries to hit his enemy with an arrow, but apparently he doesn't see anyone in the dark corridor. At that moment, he tries to ask who is there. Junhyuk appears, calling for the assassin, who becomes confused upon realizing that the man knew who he was. He grabs his enemy's weapon, leaving him completely speechless. Stepping out of the shadows, the protagonist slowly reveals his face. Even though Chojin-su didn't know him, sooner or later he would find out. Confused, Chojin-su asks if that bastard was messing with him. Without wasting time, he breaks the arrow and throws it aside, demonstrating all his power. Junhyuk makes a serious accusation, revealing the betrayal of selling information about the villain's locations. Besides that, forcing him to use the returned stone before he could finish preparing. At that moment, the assassin realizes the nonsense the young man was talking about. Despite everything, nothing the protagonist said would make any difference. Shojin-su becomes frightened upon realizing he was being confronted, but he wasn't going to leave the situation like that and charge for the attack. The warrior remains standing in the same place, observing all that movement. Meanwhile, his enemy approaches quickly, anticipating an attack. Chun Junhyuk seems to wait eagerly for each strike. Using one of his hands, the opponent tries to land a quick and precise hit. Shortly after, he switches his moves to a predatory kick. Noticing that nothing hits his enemy, he tries to advance with a jump. Jin-soo becomes confused, realizing he couldn't land any kind of attack. The hero keeps provoking the protagonist upon noticing his perplexed expression. Surprised, the man turns, unable to believe the audacity of that young man. But before he can make any move, his face is struck by a furious punch. Feeling the pain spread through his body, he touches his face, appearing embarrassed. With a smile on his face, Jin-hyuk states that from that day on, his opponent wouldn't need that meal anymore. Jin-soo puts one of his hands in his pocket, looking for a tool. Suddenly, he uses a device that creates smoke in the environment. Surprised by that unexpected move, the young man can no longer see anything in front of him. Realizing that his opponent was defenseless, the assassin wields a sharp weapon. Jin-hyuk grows increasingly irritated, trying to force his eyes to see in all directions. Meanwhile, the man approaches from behind the protagonist, but he already had a trick up his sleeve and decides to activate his super sense. Unaware of his intentions, Jin-soo charges for the attack, believing in his victory in the fight. His goal is to strike the victim's neck with full force, but his movement is quickly stopped by the hero. Not understanding anything, the boy becomes confused and lost in the middle of that situation. Using all his skill, the warrior grabs his enemy's body. Falling to the ground, he tries to strike his face with another blow. In the end, all villains were the same, always trying to dominate by attacking the neck from behind. After hitting his enemy with a blow, Jin-hyuk still had a strange sensation in his eyes. Not understanding what kind of substance was used, he tried to rub his hands to recover his vision. Meanwhile, the villain desperately begged for his life, saying he would give all the items he had collected in exchange. But the young man already knew the full address of where all those things were. Unable to move a muscle to get up, the boy became increasingly impressed by his opponent's abilities. Jin-hyuk had killed many awakened ones while living as a villain, turning all the stolen items into money. At that moment, he was completely determined to end Jin-soo's life. The assassin begged for his life, but the protagonist didn't seem to care at all. When the world was completely destroyed, all of that became meaningless. The body of the wanted assassin Jin-soo was left in front of a police station. The latest news reports that the prime suspect in the Gangnam serial murders was arrested last night. With a smile on his face, the hunter paid close attention to every piece of information. On his phone, he watched the images of Jin-soo's arrest. Before the regression, the warrior's power was at the same level as Jin-soo. However, the difference in strength status of 100 was very clear, enough to tear that guy apart like paper. While watching the news, he noticed people's happiness about the assassin's arrest. A hunter states that it was very difficult to operate in the Gangnam area and that many people were scared. Now he was very relieved to realize he could finally focus on his hunts. Shortly after, the president of the association enters the room. Noticing Jin-hyuk's presence, he apologizes for being late, but the boy doesn't seem to care anyway. That meeting was scheduled by the protagonist, which made the president suspect he might be having problems. Shrugging, the hunter already said it wasn't anything concerning. That meeting happened so the young man could discuss some new adjustments to the contract. The gray-haired man becomes frightened upon hearing that the boy intended to terminate the agreement. According to Jin-hyuk, the promise made to the president of the association would have to be undone. Outside, the sunlight spread across the entire environment. On the highway, a car accelerated more and more. Jin-hyuk was driving the vehicle with a slight smile on his face. Shortly after, a young man is awakened by the sound of the doorbell. At that moment, he is shocked to realize who is standing in front of him. Suddenly, he bows deeply in respect to Jin-hyuk. Meanwhile, the protagonist jokes that the boy looked like a gangster. He had come to the house just to talk about something with his grandmother. At the same instant, the boy calls for his grandmother, shouting. Upon hearing that Jin-hyuk had something important to tell her, his grandmother's interest is sudden. At every moment, he kept asking the old lady to hurry because it seemed like something urgent. In the kitchen, the three are sitting calmly for the conversation. On the table, there is a colorful and very powerful crystal. Jin-hyuk informs that this is the dealer's awakening stone, an extremely expensive item worth about 1 billion. The grandmother is extremely shocked, wondering how it would be possible for that item to be with a young man. His plan was to give the awakening stone to Chang-soo if the old lady agreed. The two seem confused by the young man's intention. The hero explains that he needed someone trustworthy to handle difficult tasks, and Chang-soo was the right person. But the elderly woman didn't seem to agree with the young man because she considered the boy quite clumsy. Since he was young, he always managed to get into trouble but wasn't the type of person to commit betrayal. In the end, he managed to get porter position and went hunting in dangerous areas, becoming someone respectable. The lady did not seem convinced to give permission for her grandson to go despite the promises of protection. Noticing the young man's persistence, she agrees to the conditions. Excited, Chang-soo is immensely grateful that his grandmother agreed. Her last request is that the boy doesn't act like he's awakened without a reason. Jin-hyuk explains that he did mercenary work privately, not being officially part of the association. Confused, the boy asks if the association didn't care about that situation. Deep down, the protagonist knew that the association wouldn't want to be involved with that kind of work. Suddenly, his memories go back to the day he discussed his plans with the president. To do mercenary work, it is necessary to open an office and register it as a business. But that was due to taxes, and being a mercenary was a very different case. That's why the young man questioned the possibility of the president granting permission for a guild registration. At that moment, the gray-haired man began connecting the fact that he wanted to break the contract. If he registered a guild and didn't manage it properly, later rumors could arise about tax evasion and other gossip. However, the president was confused about the idea of creating his own guild. Due to the support received from the association, he warned that he wouldn't be able to help with the situation. Confused, Choi Jun-hyuk didn't understand what his next step should be. Besides that, the president didn't seem to understand the reason for mercenary work since he already had a large amount of money. Determined, the young man explains that when you can do it, you increasingly want to expand. Not long ago, he realized that hunting some monsters made a real difference in the world. As a hunter, his goal was to hunt more and more monsters before dying, making the world a better place. Upon hearing those words, the president began to understand the young man's intentions. Suddenly, he calls Jun-hyuk's attention, who responds immediately. But he simply asks the young man if he came to the association just to talk about cockroaches. The president suggests taking advantage of being at the association and registering the guild, making the process easier. By officially registering, there would be a formality to request assistance in the future, implying more structured processes. Through an official commission, possible misunderstandings or discomfort between the involved parties would be avoided. With a slight smile on his face and winking one eye, he waits for the protagonist's response. Choi Jun-hyuk seems to like the options offered to him. Returning to the present, he reassures the others by stating that he already resolved the situation with the association. Instantly, Chang-soo is shocked by that answer. But his grandmother quickly gives him a smack on the back of his neck, realizing the boy doubted Jun-hyuk. The grandmother believed every word the young man said, knowing that he wouldn't tell lies. After explaining his plans, he adds that they would be leaving soon. Without thinking twice, the old lady agrees, saying that he should go to a better place. Suddenly, he asks if the elderly woman would like to come with them. Since the death of their parents, he and the kids had always trusted that person, and he knew that without Chang-soo, things could be much lonelier. That's why he proposed for the old lady to move with them. But she seems uninterested, pointing out that she already had a great house. Shrugging, she states that the young man could rest assured and live in a nice place with his brothers. Realizing the lady's refusal, Choi Jun-hyuk understands her personal reasons. Shortly after, he stands up from the chair, ready to do something unusual. Bowing deeply, he shows how extremely grateful he is for the care the old lady gave him as if he were her own son. The grandmother is radiant with the gratitude expressed by the boy, who was very special. A week later, everything was already prepared. Standing in front of a door, the two young men were ready to start the adventure together. Chang-soo notices that both of them were overflowing with style, while the warrior asks him not to exaggerate his enthusiasm. The sign on the door indicates the JHA mercenary organization. The modern and minimalist office has a spacious area with carpeted floors and fluorescent ceiling lights. The two share a meal together, eating noodles from a bowl. Chang-soo is surprised by the appearance of his food. Jun-hyuk tells the young man to enjoy the meal since they would have more work in the afternoon. Quickly, the boy puts his hands together and gives thanks for the prayer to Hyunnim. Suddenly, he makes a small correction, thanking the awakening stone instead. Beside him, the hero is confused by all that strange behavior. Chang-soo starts thanking the protagonist for giving him an awakening stone that is worth a fortune. However, the hunter informs him that, to begin with, the item wasn't even his. Shocked by the revelation, the boy questions him further about it. He explains that he received the stone from a guy at work because he was in debt. That was a long story to tell at that moment, so they should eat the noodles before they got cold. Suddenly, a girl enters the room and notices that both were in the middle of a meal. Next to her, a red-haired woman congratulates them on starting a mercenary group. At the same moment, the hunter recognizes Kang Jae-yeon from the Genesis Guild. Since the awakening test at the association, that was the first meeting between the two. Chang-soo is impressed by the beauty of that girl. Accepting the compliment, she becomes completely embarrassed. She then prepares to explain how she managed to find the place. Suddenly, Master Lee Dae-soo interrupts the meeting with his presence. Choi Jun-hyuk is even more shocked to see the man in front of him. Smiling, he says that the protagonist should have mentioned the opening of an office. Not believing what was happening, he can't even finish his meal. Showing her phone, Kang Jae-yeon informs that she received countless messages from someone named Park Chang-soo. In the conversation, he introduced himself and asked for support for the mercenary group. The boy gets nervous and says he was just trying to help promote the organization. Jun-hyuk becomes increasingly irritated while the boy continues talking about negotiations and marketing. Lee Dae-soo agrees with the boy's promotion, but the protagonist wanted it to be a small member group. With a smile on his face, the master asks if on such a beautiful day the two were just going to sit and eat noodles. Embarrassed, the protagonist says that if he had been informed about more people coming, he would have prepared a feast. Choi Jun-hyuk is shocked to realize that the man had already prepared a catering service. Excited, he says it's just a small, thoughtful gift. At that moment, he thanks the man for all his generosity. Another girl named Haisu appears to offer her congratulations. She couldn't believe that the building belonged to the young man. Owning an investment of that size at his age was something incredible that sparked envy. However, the protagonist's face starts turning red from so much embarrassment. At that moment, he was receiving priority treatment just for owning a building. Kang Jae-yeon observes the whole scene with an intrigued look. Haisu was curious to know what would happen with the group hunts after the start of the mercenary work, but he already had the perfect plan to not harm either side and would divide the tasks. Meanwhile, Kang Jae-yeon began to interfere in the conversation between the two, pushing the girl aside. Suddenly, she asked for a private moment with the hunter. Since she didn't have much free time, she ended up being a bit rude. Even not liking the attitude, Haisu accepts her request. Shortly after, she walks out of the room quite irritated. Kang Jae-yeon informs that she didn't come to the place just to offer congratulations and had a request to make. Noticing that the Genesis Guild had a ranky mission, he was impressed. Deep down, he knew that the tankers in that organization were more than capable of handling that kind of task. Kang Jae-yeon mentions that the request fee was set at 1 million plus the percentage. Without thinking twice, Chang Su butts into the conversation and says that the two, besides being their first job, 1 billion was an abundant amount of money. Most people wouldn't reject the guild's offer since it was considered bad luck. Meanwhile, the girl waited for the official response, stating that she could get the money immediately. Despite everything, Choi Jun-hyuk seemed quite suspicious of the situation but decided to accept. Upon hearing his words, Kang Jae-yeon became extremely excited. However, the hero had two conditions for the mission. Making a proposal, he suggests the purchase of a skill card. Paying attention, the girl hears the mention of the name Blessing of Seelan, a buffer-type skill card. At the same instant, her eyes shine upon hearing that well-known name. Her assistant did some research and managed to find an estimated value of 13 billion for that item. Choi Jun-hyuk could show the card immediately if she was interested. But Kang Jae-yeon wants to know what the other condition imposed by the young man is. Standing up from his chair, he makes a request for when she learns the skill. The only thing she would have to do is shake his hand. In silence, Kang Jae-yeon seems to reflect on those options. Shortly after, the two seal an agreement by shaking hands. Each of them would gain something from that important deal. A day later, in the upper zone of the Gangnam area, the scene is devastating with ruins and destruction. Suddenly, energy starts spreading throughout the area. From inside the portal, countless warriors appear ready for the hunt. Choi Jun-hyuk questions the idea of traveling to the beginner zone, suggesting that normally people use cars for that kind of travel. While most guilds only have one teleporter, she managed to teleport to an advanced area. Now they needed to focus on distributing the monsters. Opening the map, the boy shows that the nearest ones were located in 3 main places. The problem was that 2 of them were very close together and the rest were much farther away. Kang Jae-yeon suggests going to the location where there was only 1 monster. However, the Taebaek Guild had already reserved those 2 spots and the nearest areas belonged to other guilds. When the hunter Lee Dae-soo found out that Jun-hyuk was coming, he acted faster. The protagonist realizes the threat he represents to the other guilds. Nervous, the boy explains that the man had asked them to take responsibility for that location. But Kang Jae-yeon doesn't seem to accept that situation willingly, saying she would confront the master. Suddenly, her attention turns to another location. The hero didn't seem to care about the situation they were facing. To the girl's surprise, he wanted to face 2 monsters at once. Determined, he compares the possibility of taking down 2 creatures with his last battle and starts making assumptions. In the end, he didn't believe it was such a big problem that couldn't be easily solved. Meanwhile, a monster was destroying everything in the city with its sharp claws. In the middle of it all, the hunter was waiting for the enemy's furious attack with his shield. The girls didn't seem worried about the situation since the leader stated that the young man was very capable. Besides having faced 5 monsters at once, he was an irregular. At that moment, she realizes her colleague was too worried about the boy's safety. Contrary to her suspicions, she says she believes Jun-hyuk is a good person. Normally, famous tankers tend to think only of themselves and be extremely arrogant. But Mr. Choi Jun-hyuk was different for greeting all the guild members and being very humble. Kang Jae-yeon still doesn't seem convinced by the girl's words. Suddenly, she answers a call for everyone to get ready. When the signal was given, they would start the attacks. Meanwhile, Jun-hyuk was using all of his skills to weaken the monster. He was running everywhere, but the 2 were extremely strong. Suddenly, a strike tries to hit his body, but he manages to dodge. At that moment, he realizes he couldn't use the copied skills or the ones received from Park Gang-ho. But he didn't have enough time to think about the problems and started running from the creature. He already expected it to be a tough fight, but dealing with 2 monsters seemed too much. Raising his shield, he starts to prepare. Suddenly, he calls upon all this power, releasing energy amidst the destruction. That was the perfect boost to attack. The other guild members start coming out of their hiding spots. From a distance, they watch the scene shocked. With sweat running down his face, Jun-hyuk reflects on the problems he would have faced if he hadn't taken Yeomyeon's ring. Chang Su would be completely disappointed if he knew that his main objective was that item between his fingers. The ring offers significant bonuses in terms of HP regeneration, increased defense, and other attributes. The fact that it increases HP by 10,000 was incredible, plus regenerating 1,000 HP per second compared to zombies. The destruction in the city was complete with rusted cars scattered everywhere. The members collected the rewards and carefully observed the area. Shortly after, Kang Jae-yun informs that the deposit request has been completed. Using his phone, Junhyuk confirms the deposit and asks if everything was finished. With a smile on her face, the girl thanks him for the help during the job. Now the protagonist could leave a little richer after completing the Genesis Guild's first mission. Several requests to help with tasks or contracts started coming from guilds of various sizes. The lack of tankers may have caused difficulties in completing some missions. Moreover, most rank D tankers hunted in that region usually sponsored by large guilds. The young man is hit with a blow to the face, being thrown backward. In any case, the protagonist spent a month hunting relentlessly. When there was no mercenary work, he hunted with the team, and when there wasn't even that, he ended up going alone. At that moment, he realized he was reaching his limit and wouldn't be able to travel the long road alone. Shortly after, an energy starts taking over his body. The system shows that the second awakening is complete, generating skill points and an additional core. His body begins to transform while the random skill used by the previous user, Park Kang-ho, is inherited. The urban environment is completely devastated with partially destroyed buildings and ruins. The system highlights the features and improvements of skills such as increased efficiency and reduced cooldown time. For now, with the second awakening, both the protagonist's vitality and strength had increased. While tasting a protein bar, he thinks about how to distribute the points to improve his skills. Navigating the system, he tries to check what would be equivalent to a third awakening. Besides the skills, he begins to suspect that other things have been altered. Carefully, he observes all the new information. The unique skill combination level 1 combined 2 general skills to create a new one. At that moment, he realizes how that function was truly incredible. At the same instant, he tries to combine 2 completely different but complementary skills. His eyes shine as he realizes he could combine Lightning Flash with Mountain Split. Savoring the protein bar, he concludes that the number of skills he could create was infinite. However, there was no need for much fuss, and he decided to carefully observe the changes. The next feature allowed him to copy skills without physical contact. At that moment, he remembers the handshake he would give Kang Jae-yun to copy her skill. That way, he wouldn't need to bother anyone else for physical contact anymore. If the second awakening already gave him that enormous amount of power, he wondered what the changes with the third would be. Now he was ready to check the skill he was most curious about. The skill Valkyrie Summon at maximum level summons a Valkyrie based on the caster's pure attributes. That was the skill inherited from Park Kang-ho. Suddenly, he notices something strange happening in front of him. The option to summon a Valkyrie appears with the words yes and no. Determined, the protagonist states that there was no way he could refuse such an offer. Soon after, beams of blue light start to spiral in the air. A portal begins to open in front of the warrior. Confused, he seems unable to understand anything happening before his eyes. A beautiful female figure begins to form, assembling from the beams of light. The energy is so intense that he can barely observe the entire scene. In a short time, the Valkyrie is fully formed and calls him Lord. Impressed with that ability, Junhyuk is left speechless, not knowing how to react. Looking at the system, he seems genuinely shocked by what just happened. According to the information, he could choose a name for the Valkyrie. However, the Valkyrie's status window was a bit strange without skills and equipment. The woman explains that her lord should be responsible for equipping the empty slots. If he equipped her with gear, it would be directly applied to her. Although it was strange, she starts to understand what needed to be done. Shortly after, a portal opens upon activating the subspace. Koi Junhyuk sticks his head into the red energy and starts searching for valuable items. Meanwhile, the Valkyrie waits for her master's return with new instructions. The scenery remains decayed with toppled buildings and empty streets. At that moment, the Valkyrie was already much better equipped with new armor. Even though the equipment wasn't to her liking, the hero asked for a bit of understanding. Navigating the system, he observes the items that were still empty. Soon after, he adds new boots for his subordinate. However, he explains that there weren't many pieces of equipment designed for women. Once again, he checks the system to observe the changes. The name field was still blank, and he reflected on how to fill it. Suddenly, he decides to ask the Valkyrie what her original name was. The girl responds that her previous master, Park Kang-ho, called her Park Ji-young. However, that wasn't to the warrior's liking, as he preferred more Korean-sounding names. The Valkyrie explains that the name given to her was the same as the younger sister of her former master. At that moment, Junhyuk is shocked by the information he receives. Apparently, he had no knowledge of Park Kang-ho's younger sister. Some memories related to a distant past begin to surface in his mind. He remembers the man's last request, begging the boy to find his family. Handing over a photo, he asked to take care of the family members in case they were still alive. That promise could not be broken under any circumstances, as he would not be forgiven even in death. The sun had already disappeared by that time of day, with the sky filled with clouds. According to the rules, she should receive a new name if the previous one was uncomfortable. Choi Jun-hyuk suggests naming her Sarah due to the easy pronunciation. With a smile on her face, the Valkyrie says that any name chosen by the master would be great. Now, he wanted to know if he should give her commands every time they fought or if she would be able to act on her own. The commands given by the master would be prioritized in tougher battles, but she could respond according to the situation. With curiosity in his eyes, he asks what fighting style Park Kang-ho had chosen. When she was with her previous master, the Valkyrie used to act as a frontline defender. Immediately, the boy asks for the map to appear in front of him. Observing all the locations, he wonders if the two should try hunting a monster as a test. Meanwhile, the creature was wandering calmly through the city. Unexpectedly, a warrior appears in front of it, ready for battle. Since he was different from Park Kang-ho, he would need assistance during the attack instead of defense. Floating through the air, she listens to her master's orders and charges her weapon. Sarah knew all the dangers, understanding that she could be restored if she died during battle. From the ground, he orders the Valkyrie to focus on dealing as much damage as possible. Suddenly, the creature lets out a scream, preparing for the fight. Meanwhile, the protagonist remains on the ground, shielding himself with his shield. Giving clear instructions to the Valkyrie, he asks her to strike with lightning flash when hearing the command. At that moment, Sarah seems to fully understand any type of order. Sensing the monster's approach, Jun-hyuk moves his shield. With a leap, he activates the lightning flash ability. Suddenly, his body appears behind the giant creature. With determination, he uses the mountain split ability, considering it more suitable for the situation. The efficiency boost options from the core and the ring now totaled over 100%. During the fight, he realizes he no longer needed to hold the aggro for so long. Now he decides to launch an attack with the shield. His weapon travels at catastrophic speed and strikes the creature's face. At that moment, he orders Sarah's attack, who was already prepared for combat. Immediately, the Valkyrie starts flying as fast as she can, ready to use lightning flash. Shortly after, she is already positioned behind the creature. With a strike, she swings her sharp spear using Mountain Split. The monster's eyes almost pop out of its head as it feels the pain spreading through its body. That powerful strategy was enough to finish off the enemy. The two look at each other attentively while the monster slowly disappears. With that Valkyrie by his side, the protagonist believed it was possible to face rank D. Meanwhile, in the neighborhood of Tool Street, everything seemed calm. Walking through the blocks, Jun-hyuk discovers that Sarah had some emotions. Before becoming a Valkyrie, she was a human being. Valkyries were originally members of a destroyed world, selected among those who achieved specific feats. While the Valkyrie's voice was coming out through the system, the warrior seems to understand the situation. Upon arriving at his destination, he finds an employee with short hair and glasses. Asking for permission, he informs her that he came because of the rumors about a talented master craftsman. However, the girl informs him that the shop was no longer accepting production orders. Her face changes when the young man mentions S-rank equipment. Completely shocked, she asks the young man to repeat what he just said. Possessing materials from B-rank monsters, he was requesting the creation of equipment with those same items. At that moment, the girl is completely stunned, wondering how the young man had B-rank materials. But he didn't seem willing to reveal his source, stating that he would look for another shop. Realizing her overreaction, the employee apologizes for her curiosity. The request was specific for equipping himself with an armor set, plus one in a female format and portable shields. Doing the calculations, the girl asks for the woman's body measurements. Thinking for a moment, the warrior informs her that the woman is about 1.70 meters tall. When asked about her bust size, he looks at the system, waiting for a response from the Valkyrie. With his face completely red, he says that the size could be B. After collecting the main information, the employee already had everything necessary without further issues. Since it was a production with B-rank materials, everything would be ready in about 5 months. For now, the equipment he possessed was enough, and there were still 6 months left until a new gate would appear. Extending his hand, he refrains from closing a deal with the craftswoman. At the same moment, he would hand over all the materials for production. Before leaving, he asked about a place called Dabag Detective Agency. To help him, the girl provides the best directions to reach the desired location. Looking at the boy's face, she wondered what kind of things he was looking for. Shortly after he arrived at his destination, a building with closed gates. Meanwhile, a man was calmly reading the daily newspaper. Without looking at his potential client's face, he asked the reason for the visit. Without saying anything, Choi Jun-hyuk simply places a photo on the table. Lowering the newspaper, the detective listens to the young man's request, who was looking to find the woman in the photo. The brown-haired girl was named Park Ji-young. 1 week later, the sun reflected off the building windows. Inside the personal training room, 2 warriors held their weapons. Flying through the air, the girl activated her shield as an attack mode. Quickly, the strike hits the monster's face. Sarah informs that it was the perfect opportunity for her master to attack. At that very moment, he starts running, using the power of the lightning flash ability. Along with the mountain split strike, he is able to cause severe injuries to that creature. To his delight, the notification informs him that the mission was completed. The total hunting time lasted 8 hours and 20 minutes. However, he knew that time wouldn't be enough. When starting training, they spent more than 10 hours, which represented great progress. But Choi Jun-hyuk knew that Park Kang-ho was capable of defeating 10 Class C monsters in just 1 hour. Sarah feared for her master, stating that he shouldn't be so impatient. As an observation, she informs him that the master was constantly getting stronger through the combination of abilities. At that moment, he checks the system and sees the new War Master ability. That was the new skill created by combining Perfect Defender and Perfect Attacker. After testing it for a week, he discovered that combined abilities are either reborn as a new skill or fused. Shrugging, he informs Sarah about the sudden opening of a gate in Anhyeondong. The priority would be to reduce the hunting time as much as possible, preparing for what was to come next. Upon hearing the master's orders, the Valkyrie understands everything perfectly. Shortly after, he answers a call from Jang Ta-woo from the detective agency. At that moment, the fit man was in front of the building and needed to speak with the boy. Turning his back, he tries to understand the urgency behind the meeting. The two meet to talk while having coffee. Jang Ta-woo mentions the outlaw awakeners who had settled in the dangerous red zone. Most of those bandits were first awakeners who captured ordinary people to be enslaved. However, the protagonist didn't understand the connection with the girl he was looking for. In the man's opinion, Park Ji-young and her family could be living as slaves to the outlaws. Choi Jun-hyuk is completely shocked by the revelation and tries to understand the reason behind the suspicion. Jang Ta-woo informs that the girl's family had recently lived in Samsung-dong, which was now considered part of the Red Zone. Even so, none of that could be confirmed with absolute certainty. Yesterday, the detective's informant reported that there was a group of outlaws hiding in Samsung-dong. However, he didn't have the exact location, but was sure he could get the information soon. Additionally, he was planning to continue the investigation throughout the area. At that moment, he hands the family photo to Choi Jun-hyuk. His eyes inevitably go toward Park Ji-young's face. Meanwhile, night was falling over the city. Arriving at his home, the protagonist looks for his younger siblings. Seeing the children's faces instantly made him happier. Upon hearing that they had been studying all afternoon, he said they deserved a reward. Meanwhile, a woman informs them that she was preparing dinner. With a smile on her face, she said they would serve it as soon as possible. Choi Jun-hyuk was impressed with the amount of food the woman had prepared. Shortly after, he asked Eun-cheol about the new nanny they had hired. While eating, the boy said he really liked the employee. Since she arrived, the house had always been clean, along with the delicious food she prepared. Yeon-jung says that the nanny also played with the two of them and helped with their studies. Impressed, the hero had no idea about all the nanny's tasks. Shortly after, she informs them that it was already time to leave and return to her home. Before leaving, she offers to take any last requests and waits anxiously. Choi Jun-hyuk looks carefully at the girl, analyzing her from head to toe. Face to face, the two remain in complete silence. That was Miss Jae-hee's last day of work, so the protagonist asks if she would like to extend her contract. With a slight smile, she says that she would like to be hired as a regular employee. Hearing her words, he gets very excited and decides to accept the proposal. The president of the association was responsible for hiring the nanny, who was younger than expected. The girl explains that her family's situation wasn't very good, so she decided to work with children. Nowadays, finding a decent job was extremely difficult. Besides that, Jae-hee had personal reasons for accepting that kind of job. Hearing that, the hero doesn't understand her true intentions, but the girl doesn't answer anything, she just gives a gentle smile. She informs him that the employee from the mall who took care of the boss's siblings is her older sister. Confused, the boy can't believe the revelation. Suddenly, the girl starts thanking him for the protection given that day since she only has her mother and sister. Now the protagonist was starting to understand the nanny's motivations. 2 weeks ago, she received a call from the company where she used to work and realized it was the young man's name. That's why she was able to explain the whole situation and contact the boss. Nervous, she asks if that situation was a problem since she was very confident in performing all the tasks. Jae-hee starts speaking uncontrollably, saying she could take care of the children and asked him to give her a vote of confidence. But the protagonist didn't seem worried and decided to talk only about the contract. Rank 6 in the business world of Korea, headquarters of the Mirai Group. In a room, several men in suits were discussing negotiations. Kim Do-sung, the commander of the Mirai Group and son of Kim Hae-jin, points out his father's decision to operate the guild. It was an ambitious project prepared and entrusted to Kim Do-sung. At that moment, he wanted to exceed his father's expectations by recruiting influential people. Everyone knew they needed someone strong enough like Lee Da-soo, Kim Yoo-ho, or Kang Jae-yun. It wouldn't be an easy task since the most famous names belonged to the most powerful guilds. However, the executive didn't want excuses, he wanted solutions. Meanwhile, everyone remained silent, thinking about the possibilities. Suddenly, Supervisor Hwang Chae-sung asked to intervene in the negotiation. Quickly, Kim Do-sung told the boy to express all his opinions. He had knowledge of a valuable person highly recommended like the powerful ones mentioned in the meeting. At that moment, the executive becomes interested in his words. With determination on his face, he mentions a name already known to everyone, the irregular Choi Jun-hyuk. Kim Do-sung likes the suggestion about the hero who fought against 5 ranked key monsters and succeeded. If they could recruit that hunter, they would gain huge benefits, even regarding publicity. Standing up from his chair, Kim Do-sung likes the young man's way of thinking. Soon after, he starts criticizing all those old executives who didn't have brilliant minds like Supervisor Hwang. Banging on the table, he draws the attention of his partners. Kim Do-sung reminds them that Jun-hyuk already had a contract with the association and probably had a clause preventing him from joining guilds. Hwang was already aware of that, which was enough reason for the biggest guilds to give up on him. Even with all those obstacles, the young man believed it was possible to recruit that name. And despite the opposing opinions, he was willing to take the risk. Meanwhile, the executive was observing the young man, appreciating his words and the look in his eyes. The next step would be to discuss the best method to recruit Choi Jun-hyuk. In the upper zone of the Ilsan hunting field, the situation was terrifying. Suddenly, a large monster appears, revealing all its power. The fierce and fearless gaze of the enemy was searching for its next victim. On the ground, Jun-hyuk was trying to find the nearest monster to fight. With a leap, the green aberration approaches like a bomb about to explode. From the middle of the smoke, the protagonist can feel the gaze falling on his body. Quickly, he activates his sword and calls for the Valkyrie. Sarah's body begins to form, gathering all the energy. This was a good opportunity to test everything the two had been practicing. Without wasting time, Sarah advances into battle against the feared monster. She uses the shield as protection and aims for a powerful attack. Shortly after, the creature's face is struck with force. At that moment, the threat starts to completely lose its balance. Choi Jun-hyuk runs to test the lightning flash ability. His body is teleported behind the brute, who notices nothing. On the other side, Sarah suddenly appears, floating in the air. Meanwhile, the monster watches both threats surrounding it. Together, they activate the Mountain Split ability. The strikes are directed at the creature's robust and strong body. The fight lasts exactly 3 minutes and 40 seconds, with increased power and efficient skill. At that moment, the warrior realizes he is truly prepared. The two were talking calmly when an energy started to dissipate in the air. Apparently, it was a gate that was being opened. However, the protagonist was unaware of the opening. Looking more closely, Sarah notices that it was a treasure dungeon gate. She had already entered one of those with Park Kang-ho, and the two managed to acquire powerful artifacts. For example, the strength weapon and the strength booster used by the young man. They were obtained by him inside the treasure dungeon gate. That was a very rare gate, so they should take the opportunity and enter as quickly as possible. Before it disappeared completely, the two warriors would cross the portal. Walking toward the energy, they took one step at a time together. Shortly after, they found themselves in a narrow corridor. Without wasting time, the young man decides to use his map as a means of navigation. As they walk calmly, Jun-hyuk realizes that it was a labyrinth and thanks the map ability. At that moment, Sarah realizes that she wouldn't be very useful on that mission. But just having the Valkyrie was already a great help. Soon after, he opens the information tab for a simple search. The name he searched was Treasure Dungeon Gate, a place where artifacts and abilities of powerful beings from a destroyed planet are stored, possibly for future use. However, Jun-hyuk seems suspicious of the place, assuming it would have some kind of security system. As he walks, he notices something strange and asks Sarah not to move. At that moment, he realizes it was a trap. Even though it looked like an ordinary floor, if you were careless, you would end up falling into a hole. Despite the problem, it wouldn't be necessary to identify the tiles with traps. The protagonist would use his powerful weapon to do the work for both of them. With a strike, he destroys everything in front of him. The debris quickly falls into a dark, bottomless hole. Now the two could cross safely, stepping on the remaining tiles. The map showed the exact location of the warriors. Suddenly, an arrow is shot, but Jun-hyuk manages to protect himself with the shield. They keep advancing through the labyrinth more and more. In the next room, they are chased by a giant cement ball. Their location keeps changing as they move. Upon opening the treasure chest, he manages to obtain 2 skill enhancement stones and a dungeon gate generator. After collecting the rewards, they continue walking side by side. The Valkyrie uses her levitation power to protect her master from a green slime. More and more, they keep traveling through the vast labyrinth. Now they arrive at a strange and unusual room. Compared to the other locations, this one was much more spacious, although it had no traps. In that place, there was no chest, only a book. The first was an item, and the second was a skill. Without thinking twice, Jun-hyuk reaches his hand toward the book. But the action is stopped by a shock along with a warning informing him of missing requirements. Confused, the warrior doesn't understand what was needed. Suddenly, a green figure appears from the shadows upon noticing its new visitors. The gaze of both goes toward the voice trying to speak with them. It was the golden goblin Jade, who started to recognize a familiar face. Shocked, Sarah realizes that she knows the goblin from the past. Jade states that the Valkyrie was with a previous user during the last visit. Choi Jun-hyuk asks if he could obtain the book if he killed the golden goblin. But the creature laughs and explains that it could not offer any reward even with its death. The hero's objective was only to leave the labyrinth with that book in hand, and the process was quite simple. Permission would be granted by the goblin, and then he could take the desired reward. His mission was to assist the second original user of the system so that he could evolve as quickly as possible. Confused, the hero doesn't understand how the creature knew so much information. With a smile, it explains that anyone could enter that dungeon, but only the second user could meet it. At that moment, he starts to realize that he wasn't talking to an ordinary goblin. The green figure was created by the previous master using the power of creation being comparable to a system. Upon hearing the mention of the power of creation, Choi Jun-hyuk becomes increasingly curious about the secrets. However, those questions couldn't be answered since it was something he had to discover on his own. Changing the subject, he returns to the request for permission to access the book. But before that, the creature starts to grab something from its clothes. Before opening the treasure, he would have two options. Soon after, the golden goblin appears with two bags, one in each hand. The first option is to choose 2 out of 5 legendary skills. The second option was to choose one of the 3 main abilities used by the previous user. At that moment, Choi Jun-hyuk realizes that he could possibly choose Park Kang-ho's abilities. Due to the transfer between users being complete, those benefits were entirely possible. With worry on her face, Sarah informs that Park Kang-ho did not trust the golden goblin. That's why she asks her new master not to fall into a trap by placing too much trust in the creature. Without realizing it, something very strange was happening. Everything was silent inside that giant room. Noticing the hesitation, the goblin suggests that he choose the legendary abilities. Nervous, Jun-hyuk asks if the previous user took advantage of those benefits. The goblin explains that Park Kang-ho used the system through his own power, receiving no benefits. Additionally, the boy wanted to know what the conditions were to activate the treasure. The requirement to activate the treasure dungeon gate is the second awakening of the second original user of the system. At that moment, he calculates why Kichul never mentioned anything about it since he died before the second awakening. With a smile on its face, the creature asks if there are any other doubts. Now it tries to make the young man make his choice. On one side, 2 legendary abilities, and on the other, one of Park Kang-ho's previous abilities. But the boy was certain of what he wanted, without further deliberation. In the end, he firmly pointed to the bag with the abilities of the previous user. Even so, the goblin is confused by that decision since it wanted him to choose the other bag. To it, one of Park Kang-ho's abilities was already much more important than the other option. Despite everything, the goblin had no bigger problems regarding his choice. Now it could show the list of abilities. Shortly after, the book begins to move its pages, filled with energy. When opening the system, Jun-hyuk seems confused by his choice. The ability Descent of the Giant was related to body transformation, requiring a crystal record. Through research, he discovers that he could grow in size and power, reaching the strength level of a monster. With the appropriate crystal records, 8 people could be enhanced. All of them needed to be completely trustworthy to become comparable to a creature. That way, the team would be able to destroy the monster due to their enormous size. Without showing happiness, the boy realizes he has acquired something very useful. Turning his back, he notices an energy appearing all over the place. Without wasting time, the two cross the portal, saying goodbye to the goblin. As they left, the creature wished that the young man would continue growing more and more. After growing enough, one day he would be ready to know the power of creation, and at the right time, he would become a complete person. Meanwhile, night spreads throughout the city. Choi Jun-hyuk and his siblings calmly eat the meal prepared by the nanny. His thoughts are focused on everything that had just happened to him, as well as the suspicious goblin. Deep down, he had a strange feeling about the creature, which wasn't trustworthy. Suddenly, his sister notices that he was lost in his thoughts. Returning to reality, he tries to get back into the conversation they were having. The child wanted permission to visit the amusement park that week and take Jae with them. The girl's eyes sparkled completely when mentioning the nanny's presence. Anchul also agreed with the idea since he liked the lady. However, Jun-hyuk seemed worried about the lack of rest during the nanny's free weekends. Despite everything, she didn't mind and said she really liked amusement parks. Jae comments that she wasn't tired and often visited the same places during her days off. At that moment, Anchul becomes very happy upon realizing that the nanny would go with them. The children had a certain affection for the employee who gave them a lot of attention. Outside, everything was peaceful and the office lights were still on. Meanwhile, an old man was calmly playing golf beside his son. That was the president of the Mayre group, Kim Do-seon. Apprehensive, he gives tips to his son, who was in charge of the guild creation project. Shortly after, he hits the golf ball. However, the object goes straight and doesn't reach the hole. Despite the late hour, the boy needed some kind of help from his father. Suspicious, he didn't believe that his son was lost in his plans. The executive explains that the person he was trying to recruit belonged to the association. The man continues his game, realizing that his son was planning to recruit an irregular. Kim Do-seong says that it is wiser to carefully assess the capabilities and ask for help than to move forward recklessly. The biggest obstacle in recruiting Choi Jun-hyuk was the contract with the association. At that moment, the old man realizes that it would be necessary to meet with the president for a lunch. Raising the golf club, he threatens his son, saying he must do whatever is necessary not to fail the mission. If that happens, he should step down from his position immediately. In the Seoul Jamsil Joy World area, children and adults seem to be enjoying the rides. Jae walks around holding the hands of Yeonjung and Yeoncheol. Beside them, Choi Jun-hyuk also appears to join in the fun. His younger brother seems very excited about the chance to enjoy the amusement park rides. Curious, the nanny asks which attraction he would like to visit first. With eyes sparkling with excitement, he says they should go to the roller coaster first. Meanwhile, The girl keeps observing every part of the park attentively. Thinking for a moment, she replies that she would like to go on the Viking ship ride. Finally, Jae turns to ask which ride Junhyuk would like to visit. Not knowing what to answer, he just blurts out the gyro drop almost immediately. At that moment, Unchul gives up on the roller coaster to ride the gyro drop with his older brother. However, they didn't need to worry since they would go on all the rides they wanted. Hearing that, the boy becomes very happy with the possibility of enjoying the whole day. Worried, the nanny asks if the hunter wasn't pushing himself too hard, but he knew he had been away from his siblings for a long time, focused only on work, and he was happy with the situation. Suddenly, the two noticed the approach of some men dressed in suits. Not understanding what was happening, the protagonist shows a confused expression. That abundance of bodyguards should represent the presence of an important person. Immediately, Jae starts observing the figure and recognizes him. It was Lee Byung-hoon, the eldest son of the Shinsun Group, ranked #1 in Korea's business world. Now the protagonist understands how important that person was. That's when he starts to realize the face was familiar. That was the man who would completely shake Korea in the future. Meanwhile, the giant bear was receiving information about the target. Its mission was to enter the park and eliminate the target, his son, and the 5 bodyguards. While people acted normally, the bear tried not to look suspicious and observed possible threats. Choi Jun-hyuk runs to buy 4 tickets for 2 adults and 2 children. The park was huge, with massive rides and elaborately designed attractions. On the roller coaster, the children were having an absolute blast. Meanwhile, the adults were filled with fear and couldn't relax. The next ride was the Viking ship, a gigantic and fun structure. Once again, the children were loving the ride, enjoying every attraction. At that moment, the protagonist felt like his energy was being completely drained. Now they were heading to the next attraction, something completely different, like an elevator ride. Yoonjung and Unchul were very happy with everything that was happening that day and couldn't hide it. But the adults were suffering with those rides, looking scared of everything. People continued enjoying the park, walking in all directions. They decided to take a break to eat something delicious and continue the tour. The chicken and churros looked delicious, and they were eager to eat. Jae ordered the food she knew the two loved. Meanwhile, the older brother tried to rest a little because he was extremely tired. Shortly after, he notices the absence of the bodyguards who were protecting the important people. The man sits on a bench to read a newspaper beside the child, who seemed curious about the surroundings. Apparently, his father wasn't paying any attention to the boy. Choi Jun-hyuk becomes irritated, realizing that the bodyguards were right next to him, making this situation a bit uncomfortable. Suddenly, he notices something strange and starts sensing tension in the air. Confused, he turns his head to observe more closely. Unchul was enjoying a delicious churro in front of him. In the food court, everything seemed calm with no apparent threat. The bear and cat disguises were no longer being used. From the top of a building, 2 people were watching everything with binoculars. They wanted to know if the investigation had been done correctly. At that moment, they noticed that the person sitting next to the target was the irregular Choi Jun-hyuk. But apparently, his partner was unaware of the power that Hunter possessed. That indeed was an unexpected variable that could disrupt all of their plans. Even so, he didn't seem to have any relation to the target. His partner asks if they should change the plans or alter anything in the operation. Despite everything, nothing could be undone, but they should be prepared for any threat. Quickly, the information is passed on with the order to pay attention to yellow and blue, leaving green with the bodyguards. In the end, black and purple would be responsible for eliminating the target without further problems. Unchul seemed very happy with his food since the boy loved eating chicken. Suddenly, he notices something strange beside him. He was a lonely boy, probably the same age. The boy was sitting at a table completely alone and without friends. Unchul starts looking at the boy, waiting for some reaction. Shortly after, the boy silently returns the look. Quickly, he extends his hand and offers some chicken, saying it was really crispy. Normally, he would eat it alone, but he was willing to share. Suspicious, the boy seems reluctant to accept the chicken. Sensing a possible threat, the bodyguards interfere in the conversation. With a warning, the man informs that it was forbidden to offer food to the young master and even to talk to him. Embarrassed, the child apologizes for the intrusion. Noticing that the bodyguards were scolding his brother, Jun-hyuk stands up from the table. Impatient, he couldn't believe that those men in suits had the audacity to scare children. However, one of them didn't like the tone used by the man, which seemed a bit informal. Quickly, the executive asks the bodyguard to understand that this was a normal situation. Lee Byung-hoo introduces himself and apologizes for his security team. Choi Jun-hyuk greets him, realizing that he wasn't part of the awakened. Calling his son, he asks Sang-woo to say hello to those people. Obeying his father's order, the boy bows respectfully. Unchul asks the master if the boy could sit and eat some chicken with them. With a slight smile, the man promptly accepts the offer. At that moment, the protagonist realizes that everyone seemed very friendly. The children sit at the table with the nanny and start sharing the food. On the other side, Lee Byung-hoo says that his son had a balanced diet and couldn't eat junk food often. Once a month, he invited chefs directly from the United States and China to cook for the boy. Realizing how rich and powerful those people were, the hero just gives a slight smile. He spits out his drink when he realizes the man thought Jae he was his wife and the children were his kids. Shortly after, he explains the confusion. mentioning that they were just his younger siblings. Furthermore, the long-haired woman was just the nanny hired for the house. Confused, the executive couldn't believe the man went to an amusement park with the nanny. But he understands the situation when he hears that his siblings really like the woman. Lee Byung-hoo's smile is a bit annoying and strange. Realizing it was getting late, he calls his son to leave. The boy seems to be enjoying the food and his new friends. Unchul asks the boy to meet them again so they can play together. Saying goodbye, he follows his father toward the exit, agreeing to meet again. Meanwhile, the criminals were watching the target's every move. At that moment, his father notices that the boy was very sad. Curious, he asks if the boy didn't have any friends at school. With a sad expression, he says he wasn't sure if his friends were real since he was the grandson of the Shinsun group. His father disagrees with all his opinions, talking about the hierarchy that exists in schools. Shortly after, he admits that friendship is originally like an illusion. Suddenly, a man in a black jumpsuit and fully masked starts approaching the two. He stops and grabs his sharp sword, showing that he was ready for a fight. Sang-woo points at the suspect, showing him to his father. From the right, a new threat approaches with a weapon. From the left, another thug gets closer and closer. Desperate, he calls for the security chief, Kim, already prepared to defend his protectees. Realizing it was an ambush, they should protect the boss at all costs. Without wasting time, the men grabbed their weapons, showing they were ready for the fight. The thugs begin to approach more and more, surrounding the targets from all sides. The coldness on their faces revealed their goal to kill everyone there. Scared, Sang-woo tries to huddle close to his father's legs. But Lee Byung-hoo seems very worried about the situation, with despair overflowing in his eyes. Meanwhile, the family was finishing the delicious meal. Unchul was truly a fan of chicken, so his belly was already full from eating so much. To him, it was the most delicious food in the whole world. Now he was determined to play a bit more with Sang-woo. But at that moment, his brother informs him that it wouldn't be possible. Sang-woo came to the amusement park to spend time with his father after a long time, and they should enjoy the time together. Apparently, the boy starts to understand a bit more. Suddenly, everyone starts hearing a loud noise and gets worried. People in the park start running in desperation, reporting a murder. Jae is confused by the situation and doesn't understand what's happening. Choi Jun-hyuk looks confused and tries to think about a possible threat. Without wasting any time, they get up from the table ready to leave. The protagonist realizes that the best thing to do was to get out of that amusement park as quickly as possible. Unchul states that he wouldn't be able to run and asks his brother to take down the assassins with his super strength. However, he knows that the police would arrive soon to handle the situation. Therefore, there was no need for his involvement even if the child believed it was necessary. Meanwhile, the child was trying to convince his brother to stop the villains. Jae agrees with the boy's words as she approaches. The woman asks the boss to protect the people until the last moment before the police arrive. She reassures him by saying she would protect Yeonjong and Yeonchul. The guards fell one by one, unable to resist the attack. Even trembling, the head of security was still willing to protect his boss. The affection in his eyes showed all the rage contained within his body. Observing the differently colored fabrics, he realized that it was the rainbow. Even so, they couldn't understand why the target was the CEO, since they usually focused on smart beings. The black agent informs that it was a pure lie. Until that moment, they had only received requests to eliminate awakened ones. With a double attack, they strike the body of the head of security, Kim. As he falls to the ground, the assassin informs that they didn't discriminate against any murder request. That way, the executive realizes that someone else made the assassination request. Without mercy, he stomps on the bodyguard's head. Holding his weapon tightly, he was ready to end the man's life. The boy tries to hug his father, realizing there was no escape. The blade begins to approach his head as fast as possible. With a jump, Jun-hyuk intervenes in the horrible situation that was about to happen. He puts himself in front of father and son, determined to prevent that tragedy. Choi Jun-hyuk had a strange feeling ever since he met those two. Sang-woo seemed excited to see that the two were saved by a hero. The black agent realizes they would have to deal with problems ahead. His weapon begins to materialize in his hands, realizing he would have to fight hard. The bandit reports Choi Jun-hyuk's intervention. At that moment, the CEO realizes that the man he was talking to was an irregular. The reason for his interference was only the child, and he states that clearly. From now on, the two should find a more protected place away from danger. Upon noticing their movement, a bandit starts running towards them. Jun-hyuk's eyes follow the threat, realizing the imminent danger. Quickly, he runs toward the red one and delivers a powerful blow. Meanwhile, he asks the two to run as fast as possible. At that moment, there were still 4 enemies left to be taken down. With a smile on his face, he makes a joke asking no one to run away. Moreover, the protagonist mocks the name Rainbow upon realizing that the colors did not complement each other. Increasingly irritated, the black agent questions the reason for the young man's interference. Knowing that the situation was not his business, he simply states that he had a strong sense of justice. Without wasting time, he begins to demonstrate all his power. A shield begins to form in the middle of the amusement park. Shortly after, he uses the copying ability on the bandits. The light spreads throughout the environment, coursing through the bodies. Suddenly, the system opens, showing his newest acquisitions. The abilities that the black guy possessed seem similar to something he had already witnessed. Confused, he tries to think for a moment about what was happening. Soon after, he believes that the man in front of him was the person he was looking for. With an order, everyone was prepared to take down the enemy in the middle. Yellow and purple join forces, aiming for a powerful double attack. But the protagonist is extremely fast and skilled, managing to dodge both. With a jump, he launches his body into the air. Without anyone noticing his intentions, he manages to kick one of his opponent's faces. Gaining momentum, he spins his body around. And then he manages to hit the other bandit who wasn't expecting that blow. Now there were only 2 opponents left to be faced. Green seemed extremely confused upon realizing that Yellow had fallen to the ground. Using a threat tone, he realizes it would have been much worse if he had a weapon in his hands, since none of them would be alive to tell the tale, losing their heads immediately. However, he came a little unprepared as it was supposed to be an outing with his siblings. Lastly, he states that he wouldn't kill any of those bandits. Instead, he would give them another option. Koi Jun-hyuk was offering a choice, suggesting that they could either continue facing the situation with him or simply take the fallen and leave. Now the bandits had a difficult decision ahead. Purple was trying to get up but was trembling a lot. Called by Black, he asks him not to believe the man's words. Green agreed with that, realizing there was no way to escape besides losing some credibility. Therefore, the remaining ones should fight against the enemy. But Choi Jun-hyuk stated that they would not be able to come out victorious anyway because they couldn't handle him. At that moment, Black realized that they would have to retreat, leaving the mission aside for now. Besides, it was not the time for discussions and everyone should follow the captain's commands. Even so, Green didn't seem to agree with the decision. Smiling, the protagonist realized that victory was guaranteed. While some helped the others to get up, the men exchanged intense glances. Turning his back, Black states that he wouldn't do any kind of trick. In the end, he asks that they never meet again. Shortly after, a person starts running in desperation. Lee Byung-woo appears completely desperate, saying that the man shouldn't let them escape. He kept arguing with the boy, claiming that his decisions were not wise. If he hadn't given them an escape, there would have been a fight to the death, and the destruction cause could have extended to innocent civilians. Koi Jun-hyuk bet that this wasn't what the rich man wanted. Suddenly, more guards appear, worried about the master's safety. One of them tries to check if everything was alright with him, showing that they arrived as quickly as possible. However, Lee Byung-woo seems extremely irritated when he realizes that the men arrived too late. Embarrassed, they didn't even know how to respond or how to react. An old man apologizes for the delay that could have resulted in a catastrophe. Because of that, he and his son could have been dead at that moment. Turning his body, he shows who was responsible for saving him. However, in that scenery, there was only an amusement park and nothing more. The next day, the sky is sunny with few clouds. Inside his house, Jun-hyuk seems to observe something intriguing. His thoughts are on the Rainbow Group, remembering that Black was someone he knew. Anyway, he couldn't understand the motivation of the bandits since they weren't villains. In his memories, he recalls when he managed to get rewards but didn't know when the gates would appear. Despite everything, there was no sign of a new appearance. Cheol-min calls for the protagonist, who answers immediately. The man asks if his friend was busy that day. If he was free, the two could have a few drinks together while catching up. Shortly after, many bottles had already been emptied. Sitting face to face, the two talked and exchanged updates. Koi Jun-hyuk found it strange how his friend was drinking. Nervous, he asks if everything was alright, noticing that Cheol-min was feeling down. Choosing his words carefully, he seems not to know how to start the sentence. Suddenly, he reveals that his guild was merging with another guild. Apparently, the negotiations had been dragging on for a long time. Most of the hunters who reached Second Awakening or higher were rehired under better conditions, but First Awakening hunters like him would apparently have their contract conditions reduced. In the end, they were trying to cut as much staff costs as possible. With no other option, they stated that the contract would end if he didn't approve the new measures. From now on, Cheol-min would focus on team hunts while looking for a new guild. Showing all of his irritation, he crushes the Ken tightly. At that moment, he realized that they treated him like complete trash. Now Jun-hyuk realizes that the invitation for a drink was actually a venting session. Cheol-min says he needed to drink something strong, and the only person who came to his mind was the guy in front of him. With a smile on his face, the protagonist's expression starts to change. Changing the subject, he says that he shouldn't worry anymore and should join the mercenary group. Cheol-min realizes that his friend was referring to the group he himself created. The number one person he always wanted to recruit was Cheol-min, but he held back because of the other guild. Despite the proposal, the man didn't seem very interested, finding the situation quite strange. Officially, there was a leader and a vice leader, but he didn't need to act any differently. Nervous, Cheol-min seemed reluctant to accept the proposal but decided to agree to his friend's request. Koi Jun-hyuk laughs while the man asks him not to play the boss. With a provocation, he suggests that if he's commanded, he will respond submissively, but in an ironic way. Meanwhile, the valuable object starts to shine intensely on the table. Frightened by the brightness, the protagonist notices the change in the object. From afar, Cheol-min can hear a strange noise. Finally, that reward was giving powerful signals. Apparently, a gate has just appeared in the surroundings. Observing the system, he realizes it's actually 3 dungeons of different ranks. In 3 days, those 3 dungeons would be activated. And if he wanted to use just one now, there would still be 2 left. Without wasting time, he calls for the Valkyrie, who responds to her master immediately. With F, E, and D rankings, he questions which would be the best option, but all have an easy level. In the end, he realizes that he would be able to clear any of the dungeons satisfactorily. Sarah suggests creating a situation where 2 First Awakening individuals should play an active role. With determination, he decides it would be better to go for the highest rank since it offers slightly better rewards. Meanwhile, Cheolmin seems to believe his friend is completely drunk for talking to himself. Making the call, he tries to speak with Changsu on the other end of the line. Without wasting time, he calls his subordinate to the office, warning about the important situation. Everything around seemed calm and peaceful without major problems. Changsu had just arrived at the office, ready to receive the news. The boss comments that Cheolmin would be part of the mercenary group from today on. Both seem excited and satisfied, realizing they would be co-workers. Changing the subject, the boy asks about what the boss was trying to say earlier. However, he warns that the important issue was separate. With a command, he triggers the Valkyrie's appearance in the room. The men are petrified upon noticing Sarah's presence. The woman appears with her magnificent attire and imposing presence. From now on, that Valkyrie would be the vice leader of the mercenary group. With a smile on her face, she thanks her master and introduces herself as Sarah. After the shock, the men remain perplexed by the whole situation. Shortly after, they fall in love with the woman's beauty. Kang Jae-eun used to be the most beautiful woman for Changsu, but compared to Sarah, she meant nothing now. Laughing, Cheolmin tries to restrain his colleague. Suddenly, Choi Jun-hyuk reveals that he was about to tell a strictly confidential secret. To everyone's surprise, he says that he was actually not a tanker. His colleagues are shocked, but he confirms the information again. Additionally, many people called him an irregular since he was different from regular awakened ones. In the end, he could be considered a multi-class awakened. Originally, he could only use tanker and dealer, but after his second awakening, he gained access to a wider range of abilities. Changsu seems truly impressed by everything the irregular was capable of doing. Cheolmin tries to calm the boy, eager to hear the rest of the explanation. That information was being shared because he wanted to visit a place with them. Since it was family at that moment, he believed it would be more satisfying for everyone to grow together. Not understanding his goal, Changsu asks where they were going. Opening the system, something starts to appear in the room. The group's destination would be the Rank D dungeon. Without wasting time, the protagonist chooses the portal. A red light can be seen throughout the room. Desperate, the two seem unable to understand everything that was happening. The energy begins to spread through the environment, creating a portal. Choi Jun-hyuk explains that this was a dungeon gate. The first to enter would be the hero, followed by his 2 subordinates. The 2 couldn't believe everything they were seeing, looking increasingly confused. Desperately, they asked the boss to come back and explain things more calmly. Cheolmin feels sweat running down his face, getting more and more nervous. Meanwhile, Jun-hyuk and Sarah have already crossed the portal, entering the dungeon. The system confirms that the second original user has entered the dungeon, resulting in a considerable increase in rewards. Noticing that her master was not familiar with the Red Orcs, the Valkyrie begins a brief explanation. The race of Red Orcs were monsters that existed in Sarah's world, and during the war with the demon, they were the worst creatures. Furthermore, they might not pose much of a threat to her lord, but everyone around or associated should be extremely cautious. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.